One bluefin tuna can cost over $1 million at this auction in Japan. And a 12-ounce bottle of aloe vera gel can cost up to $20. These are just two examples of products behind billion-dollar industries. We traveled the globe to learn about these massive and often hidden businesses. Our first stop is Japan's Toyosu Market, where you'll find the priciest cuts of tuna in a $40 billion industry.
Takayuki has been a Naka Aroshi for 30 years.
私の石地という店はですね、先代の祖父が創業したお店で、
For him, work starts at 4:30 a.m. At Toyosu Market, there's no such thing as a normal business day. Octopus and squid arrive a day earlier. Fresh fish like horse mackerel and sardines come in before midnight. And truckloads of tuna are dropped off every hour.
取扱量としては水産物は1日約、1400トン弱、それから金額にすると、14億程度ですね。
That's almost $13 million. And tuna is the market's most popular product. Each day, the fish make their way from the boat decks to the auction floor. But it's more than just the type of tuna you find in a can. There's big-eye tuna, ideal for sushi and sashimi, yellowfin tuna, perfect for grilling at restaurants due to its high fat content. But most bidders are here for the bluefin. Between 3 and 5 a.m., wholesale employees lay out tuna one by one. Bidders like Takayuki have about 15 minutes to evaluate dozens of fresh tuna before the auction begins. Sushi restaurants, supermarkets, and department stores all depend on Naka Aroshi like him. Takayuki looks at the quality and cost.
僕はですね、もう本当に見た目ですね、その一瞬のフィーリングというか直感を信じて、魚を選んでます。基本は、皆さんやってる通りのことがあって、まず尾っぽ、尻尾の部分が切れてるので、そこの断面、あと腹ってお腹の部分がですね、裂いてあるので、そこを見て腹の内側の部分をですね。
Any sort of nick or flesh wound can lower the price by thousands of dollars. When tuna is reeled in, it can wriggle and writhe, causing a chemical reaction in the muscles. The movement speeds up decomposition and makes tuna sour, soggy, and less tasty.
品質が 100% のものが 30%、20% にまで落ちてしまうんですけど、そうなることが僕は一番の資源の無駄遣いだと考えてるんです。
When the bell rings, the bidding begins. A range of hand signals known as teari are used to place bids. An index finger for 1 and 2 fingers for 2. But whether that's 1,100 yen a pound or 12,000 depends on the type of fish being auctioned. In just 10 minutes, the auction's over and winning bidders claim their prizes.
今日のマグロの競りの価格は、今日マグロ本体がですね、そんなに大きくないんですよ。103キロっていうマグロだったんで、トータル金額にすると、軽自動車ぐらいの価格ですね。
The tuna then makes its way from the auction floor to the intermediate wholesale building for filleting. Toyosu keeps the temperature between 50.9 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit to slow decomposition. Wholesalers also rely on a fleet of small trucks known as tare. They zip through winding corridors to minimize how long the fish are exposed to air.
やっぱり魚がまず空気に触れることが、品質劣化のまず第一なんですね。それが空気に触れさせないようになるべく必要以上のものは下ろさない、さばかない。
The Shiji team works as a unit to move the heavy tuna onto the cutting table. To prepare the tuna for cutting, first they wash it, then remove the ice.
細かくやんないで、今みたいにそれでシューってやるのを何回かやった方がいいよ。
もう叩ける人がいないっつうの、サイズ。
自分が選んだマグロがその通りだったかどうかっていうのは、やっぱり魚をさばいてた 時に初めて、合ってたんだ間違ってたんだっていうのが分かりますね。それまではやっぱり分からないのですごく不安はあります今でも。
Most of Takayuki's high-end customers care about two things when it comes to raw bluefin tuna: color and taste.
色がいいとやっぱりどうしても味が薄くて、で味がいいと逆に色はいいんですけど色持ちが悪いんですよ。僕が例えば一般の方が見学とか、お見えになって、味見させてあげるんです。で皆さん、大概がですね醤油つけなくても美味しいねって言っていただけることが多いですね。
It's then brought inside the shop where it's divided and filleted. Customers show up early to get the first pick.
どの辺がご希望ですか？場所どの辺でも構わないんで。真ん中で、はい。2.9。これは腹かみって、マグロの部位の中で一番高価な部分ですね。
Not a single part of the tuna is wasted, even its eyes.
私どもの、お客様、顧客にはですね、主にそういう、ミシュラン。
Customers have relied on the market's high-quality fish products for decades. Before the market moved to its new location and was renamed Toyosu, it was known as the Tsukiji market.
築地はですね、約80年以上も前にできた市場でして、その築地市場ができた時は荷物の輸送が鉄道だとか、それからあと若干船とかを使って市場の中にお魚だとか野菜を入れてくるという思想に基づいてできた市場でございましたが、
Tsukiji was the epicenter of seafood. Its success spurred demand for all types of fish. Fishing for bluefin tuna in the Western Atlantic rose by over 2,000% in 1970. But it was difficult for the market to keep up.
その80年の間に施設自身も老朽化してきているということもございますし、それから築地についてはですね、屋根はあったんですけれども壁がなくてですね、あとそういう空調もですね入っていなかったということもあって、夏が暑くなっている時とかは商品の傷みが激しかったというようなところがございます。
Meanwhile, Japanese tuna consumption was growing significantly.
それに伴ってですね、やっぱりその漁獲量っていうのもおのずと上がってくるわけなんですが、やっぱあんだけの魚魚体のものです。大きなものです。あそこに育つまでに何年もかかるわけです。それをここ数年でですねどんどん取っていってしまったら、やっぱり数量は減ってしまうし、これからですねどれぐらいそれが継続できるのかっていうのはすごく不安があります。
Japan has since placed a quota on the number of bluefin tuna caught, but it's a double-edged sword for wholesalers like Takayuki.
それはもう実際の毎日日々の生活はすごく苦しいです。それで漁獲枠が決まってしまったので、魚がその場所にいてももう取れなくなるんで、豊洲に入ってこないんですよ。これは長い目で見ればこの方がいいんだって自分にふうに思ってますし、最後までマグロ屋でいたいですね。死ぬまで。
These men are climbing slippery limestone cliffs, risking falls of up to 100 feet.
Wala talagang buhay na matitira sa pagbagsak, puro bato.
They're looking for a rare nest made of bird saliva that's found inside caves across Southeast Asia. In the Philippines, the harvesters are known as bushadors.
Ako si Alvin Villarindo, isa akong busyador ng Pangalan at Nabat Island.
For centuries, Alvin Villarendo's family have put their lives on the line to gather swiftlet nests. Just 2 pounds is worth $2,900, and it's used to make a soup that locals believe is good for your health. Demand is so high that swiftlet farms are popping up all over Southeast Asia. But bushadors continue to gather nests in the wild, even with the danger involved.
Kunting pagkakamali mo lang, wala na, diretso na talaga, laglag ka na talaga.
We followed Alvin on his hunt to find out why this ancient method of harvesting is still happening and what makes this such a risky business. Alvin and his crew gather at Bangalan Point on Mighty Git Island. His group consists of relatives, cousins, brothers, uncles, and nephews. They packed the boat with essential tools.
Lubid, flashlight, buho na gagamitin na panungkit.
And they're heading to Nabat Island. It's one of the 7,000 islands that make up the Philippines, and it can only be reached by boat. They get off the boat and walk barefoot across the slippery and sharp rocks. They make the ladder as they're climbing up. They tighten the bamboo with rope. Then they attach a piece of wood called kalitang to the ladder.
Yung pinakamahirap gawin talaga dyan, yung pag-akyat. Siyempre, hindi mo pa alam kung maganda yung pagkasabit ng kalitang. Kumbaga, sinabit. Tapos, hindi sure kung anong pagkalagay nun doon. Kaya medyo sa pag-akyat mo, medyo alanganin ka pa, baka biglang matanggal.
The stakes are high.
Tingin namin sa mga tao sa baba na mga kasama namin, parang mga bata na lang. Tinitignan ko yung sabi ko, kunting pagkakamali lang talaga. Pag nalaglag, puro bato yung mababagsakan mo. Pag hindi na sa kondisyon yung katawan, wag natin piliting umakyat kasi siyempre buhay natin yung nakataya dyan.
But advanced bushadors like him sometimes use little to no support, only their hands and feet. This is the most dangerous way to climb. In the regional language, it's known as kagang kagang lang, or like a crab.
Kasi may mga bato na pag hinawakan mo, bigla na lang bumabagsak.
Alvin has had some close calls, and he dislocated his shoulder once.
Pag-akyat ko sa butas, medyo maliit yung butas. Nung daan-daan akong bumaba sa kawayan, isang kamay na lang hinawak ko sa kawayan. Yun na, uminto na talaga ako sa pag-akyat sa mga matataas.
Nabat Island is completely remote. If there's an emergency, there's no way to quickly get help.
Dami na rin na-disgrasya na sa pag-akyat. Bayaw ko na isa na nalaglag, patay din.
The bushadors only harvest during the day when the birds are out finding food. Sometimes the caves are lower and easier to reach, but the waves crashing against the cliffs present a threat. The entrances are small, but the caves are usually spacious. They use flashlights to light the path. After spotting the nests, Alvin uses a spray bottle filled with water to loosen them. They are then gently peeled away from the cave walls.
Yung ibon nun, pag 8 piraso yung pugad, ibig sabihin yung ibon niya ay 16. Kasi partner lagi yan, isang pugad daw ang ibon kagad yan. Mag-partner kagad yan yung isang pugad. Siguro naman mayroon katulad din ng tao pag may forever.
The birds like the caves because
Ng ibang hayop kasi nasa loob ng kuweba, wala na rin ibang hayop na pwedeng makakapasok doon eh.
Alvin and his group are also careful not to pick any nests with eggs. He knows that if the bird survives, so will his livelihood.
Yun ang pinagkakakita ng isang busyador balin sa sayaw.
Sometimes the nests are hard to reach.
Pwede mo siyang magamit yung tinidor kasi itali mo siya sa dulo ng buho. Yun ang gagamitin mong panungkit ng pugad.
The bird makes a new nest in 15 days when the old one's gone. But sometimes all that hard work the bushadors put in is for nothing if the haul is no good.
Nakakapanghina ng katawan na maliliit pa.
Alvin and his relatives are the only people who harvest on Nabat Island. That's because his ancestors discovered the caves hundreds of years ago.
Pamilya na namin yung nangunguha dito hanggang sa ngayon. Nandito pa rin kami. Siguro may mga susunod naman sa amin. Pag tapos na kami, hindi na kayang umakyat. May susunod na naman ang mga bata na yung mga walang planong mag-aral.
Alvin himself was only 9 years old when he went to the caves for the first time with his father, who was also a bushador. They spend the night on the island, but even then they're on high alert.
May mga sindikato, may mga baril, baka ma-baril kami.
Swiftlet nests are only harvested from December to April, and Alvin can find as many as 2,500 in those 5 months. After harvesting, the bushadors clean them to remove any feathers or branches. Then they divide them by their hardness and color. Class A nests are the most profitable. They're typically white, dry, and made of pure saliva. Class B nests are not as white and may have some debris mixed in. And Class C nests are soft and yellow. Just 2 pounds of the best kind are worth about $2,900.
May madala lang na para may kukuha sila na.
The local city hall buys the nests from the bushadors at a regulated price and sells them to private customers around the world. The bushadors split the profits. Alvin makes about $600 once the season is complete. It isn't a lot of money, but he says it's enough. The nests are made from the hardened saliva of the swiftlet bird.
Kahit makakain lang ng sariwa, pwede naman kainin yan ng sariwa. Doon, halimbawa, abang nilinis mo, pwede mo siyang kainin na...
They're the main ingredient in bird's nest soup, a delicacy in China and around the world. A bowl can cost as much as $100.
Sa tingin ko, yung kumakain lang ng soup ng balin sa sayaw, yung mga mayayaman lang talaga. Yung mga katulad natin, medyo parang wala na lang.
But today, Alvin gave in and tried some. In recent years, demand for the nests and bird's nest soup has gone up. The industry is worth $5 billion. And many Southeast Asian countries have turned to swiftlet farming. They've set up structures that mimic the bird's natural habitat. Dark, abandoned buildings that feel like caves. And they use fake bird calls to attract the swiftlets. Bushadors say they've noticed a difference in the number of swiftlet nests left in the wild. But they're not sure if it's because of farming or other environmental factors.
Nagbago na ngayon talaga yung maraming kuiba pa wala nang laman ngayon.
The farms do pose a challenge to the bushadors' livelihood. But Alvin says cave nests are higher quality than farmed ones. Locals believe they have medicinal properties.
Maraming iba nagsasabi na nakakatulong nga daw, nakagamot ng mga karamdaman, ganun po.
And there's some science that backs it up. A 2015 study shows the nests are loaded with nutrients that can boost a child's immunity. And they're rich in proteins, amino acids, and vitamins that strengthen organs. Alvin is finally home after 2 days of hunting for nests. The season is almost over.
Kailangan ko ng pagiging isang bushador. Yun na lang kasi hindi ako nakapagtapos ng pag-aaral. Tapos unang-una ayaw ko rin magtrabaho ng malayo sa pamilya ko kasi mas kumikita na rin ako dito sa pagiging bushador.
Nagdala lang ka na dyan. Ang salita niya.
For the rest of the year, he earns a living by fishing. His wife Marby is relieved.
Tapos ginagawa kong busy lahat ng trabaho sa bahay, binibisi ko na lang yung sarili ko para ma-divert sa iba yung isip ko kaysa mag-alala, 'di ba? Kasi nga hindi mo naman mapigilan, yun na talaga ang kinalakhan ng hanap buhay.
For Alvin, climbing the same caves his ancestors did is a great honor. Now he takes pride in carrying on the tradition.
May isang negosyante talaga na gustong kunin ito yung isla. Gagawin niya ang resort na ipinaglaban ko talaga na hindi niya pwedeng kunin kasi yun nga sa amin ito eh. Galing pa sa mga ninuno namin.
Identifying a fake Rolex can be tricky.
You know, as a person who has been dealing with these things for years. When it doesn't say Swiss, you know something's wrong.
John Buckley is a veteran watch dealer who buys, sells, and repairs used Rolexes. And they're sometimes worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It's just perfectly done.
These days, used watches can sell for up to 3 times their retail price. The market is estimated to be worth $20 billion, and it's growing fast.
It's like everybody started buying watches.
Because they're a good way to store money. Between 2011 and 2021, Rolex has outperformed the stock market, real estate, and gold. But even experienced sellers like John have to be careful. For one, there are counterfeits. U.S. Customs showed us how it seizes up to 150,000 fake watches per year.
Rolex watches, inside in just plain old bubble wrap. And Rolex would never put their watches in little Ziploc bags.
But spotting a fake isn't always as obvious. If dealers like John get stuck with a counterfeit, the effects can be disastrous. Not just financially, but it can also destroy the reputation.
New young bucks that come into the business, they get caught out there real fast. And your reputation is burned when you can't make good on a sale. Factory bezel, factory dial.
We followed John through Manhattan's famous Diamond District to see how he strikes deals in such a competitive market.
It's 13.3.
No, it's not so bad.
Of course it's not so bad. Why do you think I'm offering it to you?
This section of 47th Street is home to over 2,600 businesses selling gems, jewelry, and luxury watches. John buys and sells roughly a dozen watches per week here from stores and other collectors. Today, he's visiting 2 of his regular spots.
Little Eddie's got a Patek that I need. Hopefully I could buy it from him, and I'm gonna show him a couple of pieces that I've got.
I gotta find it first.
Oh, that's good.
What's good about this watch, it comes fully complete. Look at the condition.
You got everything?
Yeah.
John already has a customer lined up for this rare Patek Philippe.
I really like this watch for
What's
myself.
the date on the papers? I'm curious. Not that it matters.
He's hoping to get it for under $40,000.
Listen, I know it's a nice watch. I'm not here to beat you up. You know I need it. 36,000? I thought I was pretty good at 35.
37,000, that's my final price. I think it's fair. You can think about it.
I don't have to think. Mazal.
No problem.
You're the man. Thank you. This watch will be sold for 40,000 and change. So I'll make $3,000 on the watch, which is not bad.
Down the street, John has his eye on a gold Rolex day date with diamonds on the bezel, or the ring surrounding its glass.
How much is this $21,000 watch?
25,000. Yes.
2, 3, 5. You like that, right? Let's do it. It's factory diamond dial, factory diamond bezel.
23.5. The deal, but I'm gonna do for you. I'm gonna obviously say yes, but.
Really? It's beautiful.
John typically has around 30 watches in his collection, and most already have buyers lined up.
We like cash flow. I write a check, I want to know that, I'm going to have that money back, I'll make my profit on it, and move on to the next one. It's like the holy grail over here. I didn't even think they were still producing them.
He doesn't want to risk getting stuck with something he might not sell, even if he loves it, like this diamond-studded Rolex from Qatar, which has an asking price of $175,000.
When you look at these that they make on the street and you compare it to something like this, I mean, it's a different world. I don't have a home for it.
Despite the high price tags, John says he rarely makes more than a few $1,000s per watch. Sometimes it's only a few hundred.
There are very few home runs in this game. I mean, I don't know what is considered a home run. Making 10 grand on a watch, it's like, that doesn't happen. Thank you, Yasha Mazal. And thank you. Thank you so much.
In fact, he makes even more money selling obscure parts than the actual watches.
These are interesting. These are called color change or tropical. And years ago, guys would never keep this stuff. But now, because they're unique, they keep them and they ask for a lot of money for them. These are Daytona dials, which are actually pretty cool. This is just tons of stuff, wallets, Rolex, duffel bags and hats. We have it all. We do.
He's hoarded these Rolex parts in his workshop for 25 years.
We're here in the lab. This is where I get to practice my guerrilla watchmaking skills. You have to have a very specific part for a very specific watch in order for it to command a very high price.
John has seen demand for Rolex parts and watches skyrocket after 2017. That's when a Rolex Daytona worn by the actor Paul Newman broke a record, selling for $15.5 million plus fees.
Selling officially at $15,500,000. Thank you for your patience, Natalie. It is history now. $15,500,000.
What happened after that was this big bull run, and I hate to use stock terminology, but that's what it was. It's like everybody started buying watches.
In 2021, Rolex retail sales were estimated to be higher than the next 5 brands combined. So why are they in such high demand? First off, their reputation for quality. They're made by hand with materials like 18-karat gold, platinum, and stainless steel. And there aren't many new ones entering the market. Brands like Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet each make fewer than 100,000 watches per year. Rolex makes an estimated 1 million annually. And that's still not enough to keep up with demand.
For most people, the only way to get one is to get one secondhand. The result of that, in many cases, is higher demand than available supply, which causes prices to go up.
Rolexes also last and can resist all kinds of extreme conditions. In fact, it started off as a sports brand back in the early 20th century.
They began making highly functional timepieces designed to go underwater, top of mountains, and on jet planes. And these were professional grade timepieces for people that needed accurate measurement.
These were not collectible watches back in the day, okay? You look at some of these, watches that are 6- and 7-figure watches, they sold for maybe $100 at a military PX or something like that.
Edmund Hillary, one of the first to summit Everest, wore a Rolex Oyster Perpetual during his expedition in 1953. In the 60s, Rolex began sponsoring tennis matches, auto races, and a number of high-end luxury events. Rolexes also started showing up a lot more on movie screens. Actor Sean Connery wore one as James Bond. Marlon Brando wore one too. By the 1980s, Rolexes were sought-after collectibles. Today, a Rolex Daytona model is so popular, it's almost impossible to get on a waiting list.
I'm still on a waiting list since 1996, just to give you an idea.
But buyers are willing to spend a lot to skip the line, which is why used Rolexes can sell for 2 to 3 times their retail cost. And as demand soars, watch dealers like John have to be even warier of the biggest trap of the trade: counterfeits. Customs Officer Steve Nethersall showed us how they sniff out and seize counterfeit watches at JFK Airport. Before a package ever lands in the US, CBP gathers intelligence on the sender, container, and aircraft. He'll start by looking at the box.
Well, I'm looking because I don't have my glasses on, so I'm cheating. The first, when it comes in, is the country of origin. Louis Vuitton, they're coming from France. The watch is coming from Switzerland. When it's coming from China, bing, that's your #1 red flag. Rolex would never put their watches in little Ziploc bags. They don't put these inside it, the silica gel. Rolex does not send to individuals in the United States. They only send to their retail stores. More than 90% of all the goods that we receive that are counterfeit are from China. Sometimes by the naked eye you can't tell, but sometimes it's that bad you can. But you look and you can see the scratches and how it's not machined properly to a nice finish.
So when Steve finds a counterfeit good, he seizes it. Then he figures out the item's MSRP, using the brand's website and CBP's internal database.
This one here would be about $11,000. That's the MSRP, what the manufacturer would be losing had this been genuine. These are generally on the internet for about $200.
Back in his workshop, John is figuring out whether this Rolex is counterfeit. After 25 years in the industry, he usually knows what to look for.
I'm looking at the color of the case. This piece is not the same color as this piece. This is 18-karat gold. We always have to check, because I can't take a chance on paying for it, #1, or selling it to someone else if I'm not sure.
One of the most reliable ways to test gold Rolex parts is a scratch test on a black stone made of quartz. Then he adds a few drops of nitric acid, which dissolves any material that isn't gold.
And there you go. Wow. The acid did not dissolve the gold. Over here, the acid dissolved the gold. It is not authentic.
But most of the time, he can spot a fake with the naked eye.
We could usually spot these just based on the symmetry of the case. They don't have that nice Rolex slope. The other, obvious thing that you look at, if you look at the amount of space between the face and the glass, you will see that it is very high. It's probably got an extra 1.5 millimeters.
John also has his son James help with fraud detection.
And I scroll through hundreds of listings, and I pick out the 10 that are fake.
The threat of counterfeits hasn't stopped sellers or buyers, though. Rolex is also getting in on the secondhand market, launching its own program to sell pre-owned Rolexes. Younger generations are fueling this new demand surge, and they're finding out about these old watches on TikTok.
I saw this watch. It's a 36mm white gold with a factory diamond dial. Can you pull it out for me?
John's son and his friend Tyler McCorsky have helped him build a huge social media following.
Buckley's with us today. Let's get it.
The bread and butter is the negotiations. People like to see them, so we want to give people what they want. But our other thing that we really do well is more so education content.
Today, we're going to show you how to change the battery on quartz watch.
John teaches audiences the same lessons on TikTok he showed Tyler when he was still a kid.
The first time I ever sold a watch for Buckley, I was 8 years old, and it was a rubber swatch. Remember those? The rubber swatch watches. And he says, I need $5 on each one. Go sell them wherever, school, wherever, and keep whatever's left after the 5. As far as the whole hustle and the whole grind,
I got that Wimbledon for you if you want it.
I actually enjoy the going out there and trying to make money aspect of this business.
15-2. Thank you.
Despite all these new players, John isn't worried about the competition.
You go by these guys who fancy themselves, watch specialists, and they've been doing this for a year or two. Everybody's a specialist or an expert, okay? Listen, I'm a friggin' expert. I've been dealing with this stuff hand to hand. I've got the junk to prove it. McCorsky really left a cup of coffee down here? Did he really do that? That's just rude.
Making aloe products takes quick hands.
La penca, que siempre, según va saliendo la penca, ya echan su espina.
A good knife.
Diariamente tenemos que filetear alrededor de 3,000 a 3,500 pencas cada empleado.
And lots of plants. It takes about 20 aloe leaves to make just 1 gallon of aloe vera juice. But some aloe products have been found to contain no aloe at all.
It's so easy to put out a fake aloe product, so there are all kinds of synthetic gels.
So how are real aloe vera products made? And can we spot the legit stuff? We visited the largest aloe farm in the world to find out. Universal Aloe's farm covers 5,000 acres here in the Dominican Republic. While there are hundreds of types of aloe plants, this farm chose Aloe barbadensis Miller because it has 20 amino acids.
Minerals, vitamins, carbohydrates, hormones, and other bioactive substances.
Once the baby plants are in the ground, it takes about 8 months for them to mature. About 750 people harvest these fields. They're dispatched in groups, harvesting section by section.
Siempre uno le quita la penca que están llena y uno la corta y le quita la punta, quita las espinas. En la parte de abajo es en el tronco, como digamos. O sea, le cortamos las pencas maduras, yo la agarro penca por penca para no maltratar la mata, la que va a quedar.
The cut leaves won't grow back, but the plants will grow new ones. It will take them about a week to harvest just this one area.
La caloría, el sol es demasiado fuerte, porque es lo difícil de este trabajo, pero uno ya está acostumbrado a aguantarlo, porque son cosas que uno lo necesita.
One by one, workers pick up all the harvested leaves and toss them into a truck. Those leaves head to a processing plant 2 miles up the road.
Aquí llega diariamente 200
60,000 libras de pencas frescas, como le expliqué en la finca. Y eso es convertido diariamente en 20,000 galones de jugo fresco para exportación. El proceso se inicia con el lavado y desinfección de la planta.
The leaves go through a bath of chlorinated salt water to kill off any little critters from the field that may be hanging around. Then they get trimmed.
Se remueven junto con la cabeza y la cola para que la penca quede en situación de poder ser extraído el filete en el área de fileteado. Y luego se da un segundo lavado.
This jiggly fillet is the gel inside the aloe leaf. That's what's used in real aloe vera juice, gel, or skincare products.
Nosotros utilizamos la mano de obra humana para sacar el filete de la hoja de aloe vera.
To do it, they need a really good knife.
Yo lo apodo el rayo, porque cuando yo lo cojo, yo siento que voy rapidísimo con él. Ella hace trabajo solo por mí.
They might make it look easy, but filleting takes precision.
También tiene que estar exactamente en el punto para poder sacar el cristal del aloe bien y perfecto. Mayormente hay mucha diferencia. Cuando viene la sábila grande se siente bien porque uno rinde más, pero cuando viene la sábila pequeña uno pasa mucho trabajo para filetearla y se siente como débil, se le va el deseo a uno de trabajar.
And they have to move fast, filleting 3,500 leaves a day.
Los fileteros más rápidos somos muchos y a veces nos ponemos a echar competencia para saber mayormente cuál es más rápido y somos muchos los más rápidos que hay.
Many aloe companies use machines for filleting.
El proceso de producción que llevamos a cabo aquí es muy artesanal. Alrededor del 80% de todo nuestro proceso es manual, porque hay mucho menos desperdicio y porque la planta nuestra, la hoja es muy irregular en su morfología.
The leftover leaf bits go back out into the field as compost, and the buckets of fillets, those get weighed, then poured onto this big table. Workers here will inspect them for any leftover leaf bits, which they'll then slice off. Once it's all clear, the fillets head to the shredder, which grinds them into a pure aloe gel.
Y desde aquí pasan hacia estos serpentines de pasteurizado o UHT. Se eliminan cualquier tipo de impurezas y de bacterias que pudieran tener el jugo.
At this point, ascorbic acid is added to extend the shelf life.
Nuestro producto es 99.9% aloe vera puro y el otro 0.1% es ácido ascórbico.
The gel flows into this spill-proof bag.
Estas dos cabezas robóticas son las que se encargan de coger la tapa de la funda metalizada, abrirla, llenar la funda y cerrarla automáticamente sin que haya ningún contacto con el medio ambiente.
This bag is then vacuum sealed and put into a bigger metal box. The whole process from leaf to this container takes only about 3 hours. But before this shipment can leave the factory, its contents have to be tested for quality assurance.
Alrededor de 20-25 muestras diariamente.
Hay un análisis que es el físico-químico. En el físico-químico analizamos lo que es el pH, la viscosidad, la parte de color, textura y todo lo concerniente a la apariencia del jugo como tal.
Me toma alrededor de 1 hora hacer este tipo de análisis.
Only when a container passes the lab tests can it be released for shipment. These ones are bound for Rotterdam in the Netherlands. There, the gel will be pumped into bottles for forever living products. But not every bottle of aloe is made like this. In 2015, ConsumerLab.com tested 10 aloe products for ingredients.
Half of them failed our tests.
A 2016 Bloomberg investigation found that Walmart, CVS, and Target's aloe products contain no evidence of aloe at all.
It's so easy to put out a fake aloe product. So there are all kinds of synthetic gels. Often you'll see the word like carbomer is a synthetic gel. And if you see a clear gel, you have no idea if it's really aloe or carbomer.
Most aloe products aren't closely regulated by the FDA. That's because they're considered supplements or cosmetics, not drugs. So a product can say it contains aloe, but it could mean a range of things. It really does contain aloe fillet, or it's the whole leaf ground up, and not just that inner fillet. Or it's a synthetic gel, and there's actually no aloe, which won't hurt you, but doesn't have any of the supposed benefits of aloe.
There's not a lot of regulation or oversight of aloe products.
It's also hard to regulate because aloe grows naturally, all over the Americas. And its gel has been used for thousands of years to heal burns and reduce inflammation.
The challenge is translating that history to our current rigorous medical examination.
Another problem is there isn't clear scientific proof of aloe's healing powers. Some studies have shown it helps soothe burns and speed up healing, while others show no effect on burns.
So it's not that aloe doesn't help, the evidence isn't there right now.
The outer rind of the leaf has been found to have a laxative compound called aloin. One study found that it caused cancer in rats, while another found it helped with constipation. But the FDA has banned aloe from being sold as an over-the-counter laxative drug.
There's no patent on aloe, and so there isn't a lot of incentive for companies to be putting lots of money into clinical studies.
They don't really need to do those studies to get these products on the shelf.
Still, consumers worldwide are flocking to aloe as they embrace more natural products. Universal Aloe saw a 30% increase in demand in 2020. As consumers navigate this growing market, how can we identify the products made with real aloe vera? Well, Todd says it's actually really tricky, but he did have a few suggestions. First, you should always check the ingredient list.
You want to see aloe, you want to see its first. You really need to be super careful on the wording because if it just says leaf, it could be any part of the leaf. You could be getting the latex, which you don't want unless you want a laxative effect.
Look out for tricky wording like 100% gel. That could mean there is 100% gel, but not all of it is aloe fillet.
So you really need to know what part of the leaf is being made. When they say aloe gel, is it a gel that's made from blending up the whole leaf, or is it truly just pure aloe gel?
Despite these uncertainties, experts don't expect the demand for aloe to dip anytime soon. In 2022, the electronic waste created by humans weighed as much as 350 cruise ships, and the industry for recycling it is worth an estimated $40 billion. We visited one of the largest e-waste recycling companies in the US to see how hard the process really is. That's Ingrid, president of Sims Lifecycle Services, one of the largest e-recyclers in the US. Ingrid took us through her biggest facility to see how it's repurposing or recycling up to 6 million pounds of old electronics every month.
So we're in Laverne, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. This is a 200,000 square foot facility where we focus on receiving, processing electronics.
Sims mainly gets electronic waste from office gear, like laptops, computers, printers, or phones.
We have Fortune 500 companies like HP and Lexmark, insurance companies, banks.
The rest of its clients are secret, but Ingrid can tell us what happens to these devices once they get here.
Reuse, repurpose, re-engineer if we can't reuse it. Very last resort is recycling. What you see here is where we first get the material in. It's a FIFO type of process, first in, first out. That's how we work it. Here she's offloading a truck, so she'll go in, get her forks into the pallet and pull it out. It's supposed to come from an office refresh. It looks like there's some old DVD players, some old stereo equipment.
The first stop, the scale.
Then they will get the weight and input it into our data center. And that's what Drew is doing over there with the computer. Then it gets tagged with a barcode. It'll tell us whether we go to destroy, recycle, or we go to reuse.
The building's broken up into recycling on the right and reuse on the left. We'll start here.
If we can reuse it and reuse the parts, then you're not making a new part. So this is the part harvesting area for laptops. Sometimes when you can't sell a whole laptop, we can remove parts from it and either rebuild a laptop to sell or sell the parts.
To get all these tiny pieces out of a device without hurting them, it takes a lot of skill and
different screws, a lot of different screws.
So much of it still needs to be done manually and to do it properly, and that's very labor intensive.
Memory units, processors, screens, keyboards, and motherboards can all be reused. Workers will clean them, check that they're functioning, and send them back into inventory to be sold again.
Lots of times when we're allowed to sell units, we'll do revenue share with it. So we'll share revenue with the client. So that's kind of a nice way to add life to the electronics and then also get some revenue back.
Big hard drives pulled from computers or servers are another moneymaker, but they come with an added challenge of security.
You can see the fence up. You need a key card to get in. I don't know if I have access. Oh, I do. So here is where you'll see the higher value material.
Any stored data has to be wiped before a drive can be resold.
We have a lot of banks and insurance companies as our clients, so you can well imagine that those folks want their data erased properly. This is where you'll see some of the wiping going on of the hard drives. At the end here, these have already been done, so they're ready to go to the next step to get resold. So our drives will sell wholesale or on eBay. You can see these guys are deemed for eBay. So you'll see 1 terabyte, 500 gigabytes, all different size drives. These smaller drives, there just isn't any value in it anymore.
So if something's simply not worth Sim's time to refurbish, it's sent to be recycled.
On the other side is destroy, recycle. And over here, we have a lot of folks that are depackaging and also removing hazards.
This part's called demanufacturing.
So we'll remove hazards, batteries, and all that type of thing before it goes to be shredded. On this side,
there's a lot of hazardous materials in electronics, like mercury, cadmium, and lead. And if devices end up in landfills, that bad stuff could do major damage to groundwater and soil.
This is what we want to ensure does not go into the shredder, because this could be really dangerous for fire. If we leave toner in there, I mean, it goes up like nothing. Toner is explosive. And then the plastic acts as a fuel source. That's our biggest challenge.
Everything that's not hazardous gets shredded.
So this is Lori, and Lori is running the shredder, all with a mouse, right, Lori? This is the control room.
I have control of how much goes in the shredder, how much is on the belts. I can stop the belt, I can speed it up, I can jog it.
It's a 400 horsepower quad shredder, which means you have these teeth that are grinding up all the material here, and those are nice printers that are getting eaten up and ground out to this on the outside. And this is the really cool part. It's very noisy. The first thing that we're trying to do is remove any steel.
A giant magnet overhead pulls out all the steel.
This is where the charge is added to the material, and based on the plus and minus will repel. So the aluminum gets thrown the farthest away, so that's why aluminum is here. Then the circuit board is in the middle, and the plastic falls right down because it doesn't accept the charge.
The leftover mix heads to another machine named Heidi.
Heidi is German. Originally, we were using it to separate plastic, but the technology wasn't keeping up. It doesn't work on black plastic, and you see today, everything's black plastic.
Now, Heidi separates everything using infrared technology.
Ginger's our metal finder. She was named after the engineer who designed her because he had a ginger beard. And ginger is just taking out any further metal that's still within the plastic mix.
What's left goes into the Dutch sink float machine, named Otto.
So I guess that's the only male machine we have.
In Otto, plastic floats, while everything else sinks.
We scoop off the top, the good stuff, and that's what will go to Montreal to our plastic compounder, and then goes back to HP to get reused into parts.
And those raw materials can make Sims some pretty good money.
So we really want to recover that value.
Every electronic has precious metals in it.
Some gold, some copper, some platinum, some palladium.
So all these elements can be separated and sold to be reused piecemeal. The copper and precious metal streams will go to a copper smelter in Canada or in Europe or Japan. The steel will go to a steel mill here in Tennessee.
But with more than 75% of e-waste landfill bound, companies are missing out on huge profits. To put it in perspective, in 2019, an estimated $57 billion worth of precious metals and valuables in electronics were thrown away or burned.
If we recycle it, then we're not digging holes and mining for virgin metals. It's a way to get some really precious commodities without expending all that energy and damage to the environment.
But it's a catch-22. Recycling e-waste could be a moneymaker, and it's better for the environment. But it's both really hard and expensive to do.
They're not designed to be recycled. Many different chemical compounds all smashed together. When devices got smaller and smaller, removing whole components became less and less possible.
Treating and disposing of these hazardous materials is dangerous and pricey. Recyclers also have to constantly upgrade machines and processes to keep up with this changing technology. And that's costly too.
We normally change the blades once a year, and when it gets towards the end, the blades get a bit dull. Well, that's when we get a little bit anxious. And sometimes they're jams.
Sims has invested 1,000 hours updating just its Sally the Shredder machine. And while recyclers are facing all of these challenges, e-waste is only expected to increase by 38% over the next decade. So is there a way to make e-recycling easier? Some say it starts with manufacturers.
What a lot of the manufacturers are focused on, rather than making products live a long time, they see their way out is to keep selling as many products as they can as rapidly as possible. And they try to compensate by saying, don't worry, it's recyclable. And so this churn and burn mentality is very harmful.
Jim thinks one solution could be for manufacturers to create electronics that are actually meant to be recycled. For example, making devices that don't have toxins, so they're safer and easier to break down. But until that happens, Sims will keep wiping and shredding those hard-to-recycle electronics.
Harvesting açaí is a dangerous job in Brazil. Workers climb thin palm trees deep in the Amazon rainforest.
Ela pode chegar lá em cima, no pegar do cacho, ela quebrar, no meio que ela é frágil.
These berries have become one of the most popular so-called superfoods in the US, and they aren't cheap. One bowl can cost up to $15. And while the berry has exploded in popularity in recent decades, small farms like this haven't really been able to cash in.
A gente fica com a menor parte do lucro aqui na comunidade, né?
To this day, most açaí in Brazil is harvested by families on small-scale farms. But big plantations are on the rise, putting pressure on families like Lucas Nogueira's and a way of life that goes back generations.
Mas é uma dádiva de Deus. Uma importância muito grande para nós, para nossa alimentação, para nossa sobrevivência.
So how did this Amazonian fruit become so trendy? And what is the true cost for the people who have been harvesting it for generations?
Vem junto. Aqui tem cacho, aqui. Olha aqui, ó, açaí. Olha aqui, açaí, ó.
We met Lucas at the end of the 2021 harvest, but there were still some berries left on a few trees. His family's farm is roughly 70 miles from Belém, the capital of the state of Pará, which grows more than 90% of the açaí produced in Brazil. The only tool they use to climb is a single piece of rope called a piconha. They used to be made of leaves.
Essa folha aqui, a gente pegava, torcia ela, aí passava por aqui, fazia isso, para ver como o tempo vai mudando, né?
Today, Lucas's son Luiz Fernando will go up.
Se tiver, só põe que tiver maduro, não tá que tiver paró. Pode subir, vai com cuidado.
The trunks are so thin that climbers have to be lightweight.
É perigoso sim. O cara tá lá em cima e uma árvore quebrar. É arriscado o cara quebrar o braço, quebrar o pé.
At the top, they swing from the tree to reach multiple bunches. Going down can be dangerous too, especially while carrying a large knife and holding an armful of branches. Dropping them could damage the fragile fruit.
Graças a Deus eu nunca caí dessa iseira. Quero que isso não aconteça comigo.
Eu já caí 3 vezes dessa iseira. Não me bati nenhuma vez, graças a Deus.
And the risks don't end at the climb.
Exclusivamente a gente anda nessas áreas, tem muitos animais, né, que nem cobra.
Lucas and his family harvested 53 baskets like these in 2021, earning them an income of about $950. That's as little as 20 cents per pound. Meanwhile, a pound of processed açaí sorbet can sell for $7 or more in the US. Part of the issue is that Lucas has to sell his açaí as soon as possible because the fruit goes bad fast. That leaves farmers who don't have processing machines with little leverage to negotiate.
Não tem empresa aqui na nossa comunidade. A gente vende para atravessador, para poder chegar na mão daquelas pessoas que vão beneficiar, que vão se dar bem.
Merchants bring the açaí to Belém by boat. It's a race against the clock to sell the fruit before it spoils, so markets run overnight.
O açaí apanhado hoje, ele dura em máximo 48 horas. 72 é assim, extrapolando.
The price of the baskets varies every day, depending on the demand.
Hoje, em média, paneiro desse aqui está custando, hoje, 60.
Most of the açaí produced in the state stays in Brazil, but exports have skyrocketed, growing about 14,000% between 2011 and 2020.
Você sabia que uma tigela de açaí nos Estados Unidos custa R$80? $15.
Quanto?
$15.
$15? Não sabia não.
Some açaí gets transported to processing facilities like North Açaí. Every day, 22 tons of fruit are turned into frozen pulp, the açaí that most people outside of Pará are familiar with.
O açaí é uma películazinha com caroço. Então 95% do açaí é caroço.
This is the stage where we see the biggest jump in price, about 177%.
Esse produto tem que estar congelado em menos de 24 horas. Aí a gente vem para cá, aonde aqui é o túnel de congelamento. A polpa fica congelada nesses monoblocos, aonde a gente depois leva para a câmara de estocagem e guarda ele para vender ele no mercado internacional e nacional.
Today, more than 70% of Brazil's açaí exports end up in the States.
Nós estamos muito presentes, muito forte, tá? Na região da Flórida, região de Nova York, região de Nova Jersey, aquela costa leste americana, de norte a sul, nós estamos bem presentes.
The global market for açaí is expected to reach nearly $2.1 billion by the end of 2025.
O mercado como a China abrir as fronteiras para consumir esse produto, nós vamos aumentar.
Açaí's popularity took off in other Brazilian states in the 1980s, when it became part of workout culture in Rio and Sao Paulo. The Bulls made regular appearances in this popular 90s soap opera that took place at a gym. Its high-calorie content made it a perfect pre- or post-exercise food, and its antioxidants made it easy to brand a superfood. That came with claims that it can solve all sorts of health issues, like
obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, strokes, hypertension, high risk for COVID-19, cognitive difficulties, sexual difficulties.
But nutritionists say this narrative has been blown out of proportion.
Wait a minute. One food can't do that, can it? No, of course not.
Nonetheless, Americans were hooked and made all kinds of acai bowls, mixing in fruit, granola, honey, and more. But it's a far cry from the culture of the people who have eaten it for much longer. Indigenous people living in the Amazon have harvested and consumed acai for centuries, maybe even millennia, and it's still a staple food in the daily diet of people in Pará who eat it fresh with savory meals. Lucas was 12 when he started climbing acai trees, and he still does, 36 years later.
Aí eu tirava para o meu consumo, para ajudar meus pais. Então eu acharia que ele não tinha condição de me bancar, né? E aí comecei a apanhar o açaí, né? Para me manter, para minha roupa, era sorteio, meus calços, sapatos.
In recent years, acai has also made headlines in American and Brazilian media for reports of children working in the industry. But farmers like Lucas say it's always been this way, and that it's normal for everyone in the family to help out and learn the trade.
É uma cultura, porque vai passando de pai para filho, de avô para neto, né?
Nowadays, Lucas owns this land along with 55 other families. These kinds of settlements are called quilombos, or a quilombola community, and many go back centuries. They were established by enslaved Africans and Afro-descendants who ran away into the jungle and started communities like this to survive. Many learned from indigenous people how to harvest and process native foods, including açaí. The Brazilian government estimates there are nearly 6,000 quilombola communities in the country, and a 2013 study found roughly 75% still lived in extreme poverty.
Mas é uma comunidade rica, né? A gente se diz assim pobre, mas se torna rico, né? De espírito.
Lucas's açaí trees grow alongside different native trees and plants. But larger monoculture plantations that produce more fruit are on the rise. The amount of land used for these plantations has more than tripled since 2006.
A gente trata como sistemas homogêneos muito frágeis, né? De pouca resiliência.
These plantations are often located far away from floodplains where açaí trees naturally thrive. That means big producers have to irrigate their açaí trees, while farmers like Lucas rely on natural seasonal flooding from the nearby river.
Isso sem falar no problema da biodiversidade por inteiro, né? Se você, enfim, transforma a Amazônia em plantios.
Some small producers have also been favoring açaí trees over others, which could become an issue in the long run. And experts worry that as açaí's popularity continues to grow, the cultural traditions of Pará and the Amazon could be lost.
Tendendo a transformar o açaí numa commodity. Isso é ruim. Aí tudo depende da escala, porque, né? Enfim, não interessa. A qualidade é pouco, mas tem qualidade. Não é isso que interessa.
Açaí is something Lucas and many people here take pride in.
Esse aqui é o processo do nosso açaí para o nosso consumo local. Isso. Olha aí, a gente bota um pouquinho de farinha aqui dentro, né, do açaí. Tira aqui um pedacinho dele aqui, um pouco do feijão, um pouco do arroz. Aqui. Aí, um pouquinho do açaí. Então experimente como nós, para vocês sentirem o sabor do nosso açaí paraense, o açaí normal, puro. E vocês vão ver a delícia que é o nosso açaí. Obrigado.
Companies spend almost $14 billion a year on mouth-watering ads like these. But it takes more than a big budget to make food look this good.
Oh, nothing here is simple. As far as the work we do is incredibly complex, very technical.
Steve Geralt has filmed commercials for big brands like Hershey's, Heinz, and Pepsi through his production company, The Garage. And there's a lot of money on the line. Filming one 30-second ad can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're working against the clock because they use real food, which doesn't stay pretty for long.
That's the misnomer about everything. Faking makes things harder.
We visited Steve's studio in Brooklyn, New York, to see how his team films the perfect burger. Today, Steve and his team are working on a test shoot for Burger King. They'll use it to try and land the client.
Yeah, good.
Brett Kurzweil is a veteran food stylist. It's his job to make the burger look like a Whopper. He usually has a budget of a couple $1,000s, and he always buys a lot more than he'll use, so he can pick out the perfect looking bun, patty, and veggies. Then he gets to work, but he doesn't cook the meat all the way through.
Because I didn't want it to shrink too much. I wanted to get as much volume out of this piece of meat as I could get.
Even perfect patties need final touches, so he uses a colorant made of gravy darkener and soap to add a charred look. He only has to paint half the burger because the camera films from just one side. A mixture of Vaseline and pulverized meat helps fill in any holes. And those grill marks? Another trick of the trade. Brett heats up metal skewers and then...
I just pushed into the burger with the hot metal and it seared.
Next, he melts the cheese using a clothes steamer.
How did you change it to make it perfect?
I just said, you're for food. But I'm trying to control how much comes out, so I've covered up some of the holes.
He cuts the onions and tomatoes on a slant, so they lie flatter.
I think you would have been a really good surgeon in another life.
Well, yeah, my mother would have been happier.
Some other tricks: denture cream to hold up ingredients.
For condensation on cans, we'll use glycerin.
Yeah, not that much, too far.
While Brett finishes up, Steve's team is making sure everything is ready on set. The trickiest part is combining what the client wants in the commercial with what's technologically possible.
They have no idea about engineering. Yeah, they're just like, robots are cool, we want a robot.
But since today he's working on a test shoot, he just has to implement his own vision.
I'll be one of those people that wears the protection.
Then he turns to master rigger Matthew Huber. He says half the time he has to build the rigs completely from scratch. They provide the structure for the specialized equipment that makes food dance across the screen. His work goes hand in hand with the robots.
The robot obviously is a hugely complicated and expensive thing that's used for a lot of what we do. But if you only just need a straight line movement pulling back, it's easier to set up a simple machine that just does a single type of movement.
Like these air pistons he uses to launch food. Or these catapults. To save on buying new parts, he uses a lot of the same base pieces.
It's like Legos, you just put stuff together, take it apart, do something different with it the next time. So we've used like a lot of these pieces probably like hundreds of times.
Meanwhile, Paula Andreas Ramirez is finalizing the set, from the tables to the ketchup bottles off to the side.
I want it to feel real. So if it's blank, it won't feel like it's a real commercial kitchen.
Every inch visible to the camera matters. So Paula's team built this tile wall just for this shoot. But they said it still felt empty.
So we just added these 2 floating shelves up there. We planned for something and then we just have to be ready for the unexpected.
Her typical props budget is $40,000 a shoot, but she can pull a lot from her personal collection.
This has been 20 years of collecting. And this is like Salvation Army, garage sales, years and years of hoarding. I always like to have extra. So if you're shooting, an example, a glass of soda, I need to have at least 6 of the same glasses for quick changes, if they're scratched, because it's video. So it's a little bit, one breaks, exactly.
So when that burger arrives, it's game time.
I gotta go on set.
Yay, burger!
Now it's a race against the clock.
Get the tomatoes too fresh.
Angle feels right.
Can we melt the cheese a little more? So you want to get a little heat in there? Go ahead and roll camera.
And push in a little bit closer.
All right, good.
Today they have custom-built water-cooled lights that don't torch the food.
We used to have like these really hot lights that would like cook the food and it would die really quickly. So like the ice cream would be like impossible to shoot in slow motion because it would just melt the second you turn the lights on.
But that lettuce will start to wilt in a matter of minutes. Hot lights are not. So quick-moving robots and tons of planning are essential to keep a shoot on schedule, because any delay could mean running over budget. The first action uses a dolly zoom to create something known as the Hitchcock effect.
But the whole background is like warping around it.
Cue the robots. They're actually the same kind that build cars. This robot cost $150,000. And it can pretty much do any move you can think of.
Sometimes you could program the robot pretty quickly. Some moves take a whole day.
Here's the second shot. Steve envisioned the camera moving through a field of burgers as each gets pulled out of frame.
We're probably only like 1.5 inches away from that burger when we land. So to try to do that with people would be almost impossible. It's a really complex move that the robots do really easily, and they do it the same exact way every time.
But speed is not the only challenge. Every shot has to be identical. If a burger is even a centimeter off, or if something on set gets bumped between takes, they might have to start over.
These fries don't want to behave.
This laser helps them keep track of the burger's position.
Or sometimes you might do a job where there's 100 takes of the same move, and that would be a nightmare.
They also have to be really flexible on set.
There's always curveballs that happen because it's a lot of problem solving, which I love.
For the last shot, Steve ties all the ingredients on a fishing wire, and a robot slices the string and the camera catches the perfect drop. This exact move was actually Steve's claim to fame in 2016.
Did this famous burger drop video that went viral all over the internet.
He slowly raked in millions of views across platforms, and global publications started covering his work. All that social media buzz earned him a lot of viewers and new clients. And he was able to launch The Garage in 2019.
The burger drop was kind of like the spark that started the path towards where we are today. And now TikTok is like crazier than Instagram ever was for me.
Steve is a former food photographer, but he wanted to combine his love of engineering, food, and video.
And amazingly, there's a job that lets me do that. There's a lot of different jobs that my guidance counselor did not tell me about, including my own.
Today, his team films 40 advertisements a year, billing over $5 million annually.
Kind of feels like CGI, but it's actually done in camera. And I think to accomplish that like larger than life feeling takes just a lot of technology and skill.
Steve says they know they've done a good job when viewers can't tell a whole production is hidden behind a shot.
They have no idea what we do at the end of the day. It is fun for me for people to understand how complex this stuff is.
But all that complexity is worth it, because there's a lot of money on the line. Fast food companies poured $5 billion into advertising in 2019, and for good reason. They know just how valuable the power of food suggestion can be. A Yale University study found that visual cues like food ads can have an effect on food cravings. Another study showed visual cues can influence overeating and even weight gain, and that can convert into traffic and impressions for a brand.
You're responsible for a lot of people breaking their diet. Yeah, me included.
These brands led the pack in ad spending in 2019, and budgets just keep ballooning. In September, Burger King announced it'll invest $400 million in restaurant renovations and advertising, a 30% increase from 2021. Which is why Steve and his team filmed this Whopper pitch, hoping to hook a new client with their dancing robots and juicy burgers. A pack of instant noodles is one of the cheapest non-perishable foods you can buy. So how did the humble instant noodle become a billion-dollar industry?
Momofuku Ando was an entrepreneur with a wild resume. Everything from selling textiles to charcoal, and he even started a school at one point. Now, Ando's story has admittedly gotten a bit mythical over time. There's even this adorable children's book written about him, and an incredible animated short film about his origins. It's called Samurai Noodles, and it's probably the coolest hour story page a company can have. And I think you could see the resemblance. But anyway, to really understand how that giant box of ramen ended up in your grocery store, we have to go back to 1940s Japan. After World War II, Japan faced widespread famine and had its worst harvest season in decades. A Nissan spokesperson would later state that at the time, people were starving and queuing for noodles at street stalls. Because of strict rationing laws and a ban on selling street food, thousands of unsanctioned open-air markets started to pop up. It's estimated that factory workers got more than half of their vegetables on the black market. At the time, Japan relied heavily on the wheat provided by the US during its occupation. Ramen and gyoza, both made from surplus wheat flour, were considered stamina food because they were high in calories and kept you full. But at the time, there was a big push to use the US-provided wheat to make bread. Ando, as inquisitive as ever, wanted to know why the government wasn't using more of that wheat flour to make noodles, which were much more common in Japan. He said, if you change your diet, you are in effect throwing away your traditions and cultural heritage. Ando thought that ramen that was more accessible and easier to prepare could be a solution to Japan's hunger problem. But in response, he was basically told, if you think it's a good idea, then do it yourself. So he did. But this was no easy task. Ando had basically no noodle making experience. And remember that checklist? He had to figure out how to bring great flavor and texture to instant food. After a year of experimenting, he finally had his breakthrough. According to my favorite anime, Samurai Noodles, the development process looked a little bit like this, which is pretty epic. Basically, after watching his wife make tempura, he realized that frying the noodles was key. Frying extracted their moisture, so they could be stored for long periods of time and then rehydrated with hot water. That's how we got this iconic break of noodles.
What you'll love is that you can serve your family in 3 minutes and for just pennies.
What I find so interesting about Ando's invention was that it wasn't an accidental breakthrough. He thought instant noodles would be a success, and he worked for a year to find the solution. Looking back, he said the experience of hardship and suffering strengthened me to succeed in a critical time. In 1958, Ando released chicken ramen and changed his company's name to Nissin, which you probably recognize. Ando played a direct role in trying to sell instant ramen, reportedly setting up a sales booth in Tokyo to give customers a chance to try the new product. At first, it actually cost more than 5 times the price of fresh noodles, but the taste and convenience made it a huge hit. It was nicknamed Magic Ramen because it was ready to eat in just a few minutes. It was now over a decade since the end of World War II. Japan's economy had started to improve, there was a surplus of wheat flour, and people were going back to working long hours. These were the perfect circumstances for instant ramen to succeed. Chicken ramen sold 13 million packages in its first year, and sales in Japan skyrocketed, growing by billions in just a decade. As its popularity grew, dozens of companies started manufacturing instant noodles. In 1968, instant ramen was estimated to hit 3.5 billion servings. But Ando wasn't done inventing. At age 61, it was time to make instant noodles even more instant. Nissin introduced cup noodles in 1971, and like chicken ramen, it was a huge hit. In fact, it was so popular that Nissin couldn't meet demand, even though they were making 650,000 cups a day. You can see how noodles in a cup completely overtakes packaged noodle sales by 1989. Today, cup noodle sales are more than double packaged noodle sales in Japan. And Ando was still involved with the company. In 1998, the Japan Times wrote that even as he celebrates his 88th birthday this year, Ando is still keen to invent new variations on his instant noodles. Today, hundreds of instant noodle flavors are introduced in Japan every year. But it wasn't just a hit in Japan. China is currently the largest market, eating over 40 billion servings a year. But South Korea leads in per capita consumption, with a staggering 75 servings per year. That's a lot of instant ramen. Here in the US, the original Nissin Top Ramen was introduced in 1972.
Most people are like Corey. They love eating all those noodles and top ramen.
6 years later, the Washington Post wrote, "Now the noodles are threatening to replace TV sets as Japan's hottest export to this country." Ando was even awarded the Key to the City in LA. And in 1989, the New York Times wrote, "The growing US appetite for Asian-style ramen can no longer be ignored." It became a fixture in US supermarkets, despite being a new type of food for a lot of Americans. Today, instant ramen consumption in the US is over 4.5 billion servings per year, and over 100 billion servings globally. And in case you were wondering, Ando finally retired at age 95. Nissin, the company Ando founded, reported over 450 billion yen in revenue in 2019, or about $4.3 billion. It's now led by Ando's son, Koki. But despite its commercial success, Ando didn't forget his original goal to help end hunger. In 1997, Ando helped start what's now called the World Instant Noodles Association. Its purpose is to improve the instant noodle industry and provide emergency food aid. Since its founding, the organization has helped donate hundreds of thousands of instant noodle servings. Ando once said, "It is never too late to do anything in life. You can have a new beginning even at the age of 50 or 60. And he really lived his life with that mindset. Whether or not you believe every detail of the samurai noodle story, instant ramen completely changed the way that people ate a centuries-old food.
Most of our smartphones have one thing in common: lithium batteries. We went to South America to learn how mines power an industry worth tens of billions of dollars.
The lithium here in Chile is locked away in underground saltwater, or brine. Billions of gallons are pumped to the surface every year, where it is left to evaporate and concentrate. Mining companies also use millions of gallons of fresh water, and in one of the driest places on Earth, locals are scared of what that will do to their already scarce water supplies. And they worry they won't get their fair share of the white gold rush unfolding in their own backyard.
Que no nos estén incitando
porque nosotros también sabemos cuándo también levantarnos.
Mining the lithium triangle looks inevitable in the rush towards an all-electric future. But what is the true cost? Jose Morales has lived near Bolivia's salt flats his entire life. He makes a living growing quinoa and selling wool from his llamas. There is very little rainfall, and a nearby river that used to provide water is all but dried up. So Jose now pumps groundwater from wells.
Y año tras año sigue bajando el nivel. Antes aquí las familias convivían con el ganado sobre todo. Como había sequía, no había pasto, el agua se ha secado y han preferido migrar por fuentes de trabajo.
In early 2023, the Bolivian government granted a mining license here that would massively scale up lithium extraction. People like Jose are afraid that's just going to make the drought worse.
Estas plantas consumen buena cantidad de agua, y ¿de dónde va a venir esas aguas?
We'll come back to Bolivia, but for now, neighbouring Chile might hold some answers. These are the Atacama salt flats, a natural wonder, one of the driest places on Earth, and a vast source of lithium. The bright squares are pools of brine, where the water is left to evaporate and leave behind a mix of salts and minerals. The more yellow the pond, the higher the concentration.
Al principio veíamos color de turquesa, donde tenían poco porcentaje de litio. Acá ya tienen un gran porcentaje de litio, ya sea.
It can take more than 1,000 gallons of brine to produce enough lithium for just one electric car battery. Two companies control the right to operate here, American Albemarle and Chilean SQM. In 2021, Chile exported almost $1 billion worth of lithium carbonate, and satellite imagery shows just how that has transformed the landscape. It can take around 18 months for the brine to move through the series of ponds. The concentrated lithium brine is then processed into lithium carbonate, which is then taken to another factory near the coast where it is purified into battery-grade lithium. The two companies suck out enough brine to fill an Olympic swimming pool every 20 minutes. They also draw 32 gallons per second of fresh water from underground aquifers for use in the processing factories. That would fill an Olympic-sized pool in roughly 5 hours. It's no surprise that water usage is such a sensitive issue in one of the driest regions on Earth. Central Chile has experienced a mega drought since 2010, the region's longest on record. Brine is far denser than fresh water, and the two rarely mix, but regulators worry that pumping so much brine too fast will increase the risk of freshwater contamination. And lithium isn't the only thirsty industry here. Since the 1980s, copper mines have been responsible for around half of the region's freshwater use. The Chilean government blamed the copper and lithium industries for a 25-centimetre drop in the height of the water table. The copper mines plan to switch to desalinated water by 2030. Jorge Muñoz Coca is concerned about the damage this use of fresh water could be doing to the environment.
La minería siempre trata de decir que ellos tienen sustentabilidad, que están mejorando siempre, una mejora constante, y la verdad es que nosotros no podemos contratar esa información.
He is part of the Atacameño indigenous community and lives in San Pedro with his 3 children. In 2015, he founded an activist collective to educate people about lithium mining.
La verdad que no sabíamos mucho de la minería del litio. Sí, en un momento que pensábamos que el litio se extraía de roca, tal como la minería del cobre.
Jorge says locals lost faith in the mining industry a long time ago. In the 1990s, the Chilean government agreed to hand ancestral lands back to indigenous communities, including the Atacama lithium mines. Some land was transferred, but crucially not the mines. Neither of the two lithium companies in Chile consulted with locals before starting their operations. At the time, they didn't need to. But in 2008, Chile's government agreed to involve indigenous people in any decision that could affect them directly. Still, it would take another 8 years for one of the companies, Albemarle, to begin giving over 3.5% of its profits. That same year, SQM was sued for extracting more brine than allowed. SQM recently committed to reduce brine and freshwater use and monitor their environmental impacts. Jorge feels there has never been real transparency.
No es un relacionamiento comunitario real en donde tengamos a alguien de la minería, normalmente para poder decir nuestros pesares, incluso nuestras quejas hacia la minera.
And his community's concerns almost always come back to water.
Tenemos una relación muy significativa con el agua. Eso es lamentable que exista en esta área tanta explotación, siendo que para nosotros esta sería un área de confluencia y de tranquilidad.
But demand for lithium shows no signs of slowing down. It is the ideal metal for batteries because it is extremely light and stores energy very efficiently compared to traditional batteries. It would take around 4 lead-acid car batteries to get the same amount of energy as one lithium battery of the same size. This makes them perfect for maximizing power without adding much weight or taking up too much space. A booming electric vehicle industry has roughly tripled lithium prices in the last 3 years, while companies scramble to ramp up production. So now all eyes are on Bolivia and its wealth of white gold. At more than 4,000 square miles, the Uyuni salt flat is over double the size of the Grand Canyon and clearly visible from space. More than 90,000 visitors come from all over the world each year to photograph the shimmering sea of salt. Antonia Cabrera moved here back in 2009. That was when Bolivia announced it would invest $900 million in the lithium industry.
Porque yo he emigrado de mi comunidad porque mis hijos querían que estudien, no quiero que estén como yo.
Antonia had high hopes that would bring jobs and prosperity.
Hemos venido con todos alegres que vamos a trabajar en litio, todos, pero no había sido eso.
A state-controlled company built a small pilot plant, which opened in 2013, but Bolivia lacked the technical know-how to scale up. Almost a decade later, the pilot plant was only producing a few hundred tons of lithium carbonate per year, a tiny fraction of Chile's exports. For Antonia, the industry's failure to take off meant the promises of work came to nothing, and 5 of her 6 children left to find jobs in other cities. Today she lives with her daughter and grandson. She says even the local school only has 1 teacher left. To make things worse, the pandemic hit the tourism industry hard.
Pocos turistas llegan, entonces por eso no hay mucho trabajo, no hay mucha venta también.
Abdon Morales is also disillusioned after years of high hopes for Bolivia's lithium industry. He's an active leader for his community and lives 60 miles from the pilot plant with his daughter.
En la casa no debe haber agua.
Vamos a buscar el pozo.
He worked for the lithium company as community liaison back in 2019. He was supposed to help recruit workers locally. But in the end, he says, most workers were brought in from Bolivia's large cities instead. Now, with the Chinese and Russian companies moving in, he's worried about his precious water supply.
Hay municipios
que realmente para que funcione la planta van a tener que dar hasta agua, van a tener que quedarse sus ganados ellos mismos sin agua.
He says water levels have dropped more than 2 meters over the last 2 years because of droughts.
Aquí cuando nosotros cavamos, ¿no ve? Pasamos los 5 metros. Esta agua es de lluvias. Este tiempo poca agua es.
Abdon is not against lithium mining. He just wants any company that comes in to extract the metal to be open and honest.
Ante todo, siempre el diálogo, ese sería el camino. Que ellos vengan a sincerarnos, a decirnos, esto es lo que vamos, esto es lo que necesitamos. Porque si ustedes no nos van a dar agua, estas plantas van a ser un elefante blanco.
If you look at Bolivia's history, you can understand why local communities might be suspicious of international interest in their natural resources. Zoom out and you can see how, for more than 500 years, silver mining has left its scars on the landscape. It was the Spanish conquistadors of the 16th century who laid claim to what's now known to be the largest global silver deposit. An estimated 8 million enslaved miners lost their lives in the mines. Mercury, which was used to refine the silver, polluted streams and poisoned local ecosystems. These ancient mines have created untold wealth, yet the region of Potosí remains the poorest in Bolivia. The government is nonetheless optimistic for the next chapter of its lithium story. Almost $3 billion of investment from Chinese and Russian companies will build an array of new lithium plants, capable of processing an estimated 100,000 metric tons of lithium carbonate each year. The Bolivian government says that it will bring infrastructure and employment, but with the touted rewards come risks. They're gambling on a relatively new technology. It's called DLE, or direct lithium extraction. Instead of pumping brine to the surface and waiting for the water to evaporate, this method separates out the lithium using a range of filtration techniques. It can take only a few hours, but it's unclear how water or energy intensive the process will be. There are small operations testing this method in the US and Argentina, but it hasn't yet been proven to work at scale. For many Bolivians, this uncertainty breeds concern.
We don't know what this agreement says. This agreement with the consortium, the Chinese consortium says, and this is incredible because the natural resources are from all Bolivians, but we have not access with to this agreement. The agreement is closed.
Just on the outskirts of Uyuni lies a stark reminder of what can happen if grand mining projects go wrong. The carcasses of over 100 trains lie in the sun, rusting away, some dating back to the early 20th century. The town was once a transport hub linking the Pacific coast with tin and silver mines of the high plains of the Andes. The industry and the local economy collapsed after the Second World War, and the trains were left to rot. The lithium industry here will need to promise a better future than that for local communities and the environment if it is to overcome doubts that it is anything more than a mirage.
There are almost double as many cell phones in the world as there are people. It's no surprise the phone repair business itself is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Hello, I'm Julius and I'm the owner of Phone Fix Craft. So today I'm going to show you how I clean and repair a damaged iPhone. My job is actually phone repairs, including micro soldering and data recovery, stuff like that. And the cleaning is just, it's not that it's a huge part of our business. It's just fixed phones that we see that they need some cleaning. So the first step, you have to remove those two bottom screws. which every iPhone has. We open up the screen. The phone had a broken screen, and the owner of this phone used it for a good while with that broken screen, so all the internals of the phone were exposed to whatever was in customer's pocket. So it's actually a fire hazard. So we try to remove every loose bit from the inside of the phones. But once it's loose, I would use compressed air like a gun. The dirtiest parts would be the charging port on all kinds of phones, not only iPhones. But actually, it doesn't look dirty if you just look at it with naked eye. And the microscope I have here, it's my most loved tool. It's gonna come with me when I die. I would just clean every phone, every speaker, every earpiece, and every charging port under this microscope. This tool we use for charging port cleaning is something similar to a metal toothpick. It's just a little bit thinner and then sharper. So now I'm going to clean years worth of pocket lint and dust from the charging port that experiencing charging issues. The charging ports would be usually filled with the pocket lint from your jeans, and then whatever is in your pocket really. If you had a cookie there, you would have some crumbs or something like that. You can see, what color threads, trousers or pants. I'm not sure in the United States the trousers or pants. So what you see here, it's actually the contents of a charging port, of what we usually would find there. So it's just a pocket lint really, pocket lint and dust. I would use the same tool that I use for cleaning charging ports to clean the really heavy clogged speakers as well. We do get phones that are really dirty and messed up, but for us it's just normal, Medics are not surprised by injuries or something like that. It's their job, so for us it's yeah. So on this phone, the battery has already started to swell, and customer agreed to get it replaced. We removed the battery. We attached the new pull tabs to a new battery. We just need to apply a new display adhesive before putting everything back together. So once the screen is pressed back into the frame, we just need to put the last two screws in, and it's ready to be cleaned before giving it back to the customer. You just have to solve a puzzle, to get the thing working, and this is especially rewarding if some few other shops deemed it unfixable, and then it comes to you and you accept the challenge and you actually get that fixed. It's nice. That's what I really love.
Some pool repairs can cost homeowners as much as $20,000. We followed a professional pool cleaner to get a messy look inside the billion-dollar industry.
Hi, I'm Miles, aka the pool guy, and I'm going to show you how I professionally clean the bottom of a pool. Grandma's pool definitely was the most challenging. The sludge on the bottom, it was like 6 inches of sludge across the whole pool. It looked very abandoned because obviously it had been left for 15 years. So that was like when I first got into the pool. Obviously there was a lot of, the water had been drained down quite a lot there, but as I stepped in it was really soft. Branches may have fell off of like the bushes that were around the pool, and then just sort of like they could have started growing like bigger as well while they were in the pool as well. So we had to shovel it into sort of buckets, and then someone would put it in a wheelbarrow and then take it down to the heap at the end of the garden, and it just created like a massive pile of just sludge. I'd say there was probably like a ton or maybe 2 tons of sludge. So yeah, draining that down and like scooping all the sludge out of that one, and just the time it took. Yeah, that was definitely the hardest one, but we got there in the end. Oh my god, so recently I've been to a job, and the pool has been left for like 8 years, but the water weirdly was like clear, but the algae in there was really like blanket like, and there was loads of it, and you could see, like, I move it around, you can see it looked like really weird, like an underwater sort of like forest of like algae. It was like really bad, and that pool definitely had to be drained down. Okay, so when I first go to a pool and I see that it's green, what I'll do first is get a pool brush out, and then I'll brush the whole pool, all the surfaces, disturbing all the algae off the surface. Normally algae will just like break up, like you put chemicals in, you brush the pool, and it will just break up into like really small particles, and then you can just like hoover it. But like this type of algae was just like really like stringy and just like solid together. Yeah, it was a weird one. And then again, there's like sludge on the floor. We're sort of just like brushing the sludge to like a pile and then like scooping it out. That pool had been left just sort of like gone a couple of days without chlorine, and because it was sort of like indoor, it had like sort of like in a greenhouse type, so it got like really hot in there when the sun comes out, and just the algae just attached itself to the tiles like so badly. It looked like it had been left for like years. People thought they were actually green tiles on the steps, and it was really tough on the tiles. It needed something quite aggressive to sort of get it off, and then what I got was just like some hydrochloric acid, mixed it with water, and sprayed it over the tiles, and it just started reacting with the algae, started bubbling up, and then I started brushing it in to disturb it all off the surface. Then I got the hose and started watering it down, and it all cleaned off, come up nice and blue. And then rinsed it down, and that literally took like 15 minutes. The woman who owned the pool, she only called us to come and open the pool in like August. Had like the whole summer just sitting there doing nothing. So like we took the cover off, and there was like mosquito larvae in the pool, and there was mosquitoes like flying everywhere. Literally so bad I had to like run away from the pool, and she actually didn't want this pool emptied. She just wanted to try and get it around with like chemicals, get some chemicals out, shock and chlorine granules we used on this one. So like when I shock a pool, that basically kills off all the algae and all the contaminants in the pool. Basically what it does is combine all the small particles, and what it relies on is like no movement in the water. So it's combining all the particles, and then they become like heavy, and then they just sink to the bottom. Yeah, after a few days, come back and it was like the water was crystal clear, just all the debris and everything was just on the bottom, and I came in and like just hoovered it up, and it was just crystal clear, ready to go sort of thing. So if you've got an outdoor pool, you're going to want to maintain it like once a week at least. No, so I get a lot of people do say to me, why don't you drain the pool before winter? But what it is you've got to take into consideration like the structure of the pool. So if you have no water in there, if there's water in the ground surrounding the pool, it can pressurize the walls and then cause damage. But you have to keep water in the pool. What you do have to do is check your pool at least like once a month and add the correct chemicals, and then when you come to open it in summer, it's going to be nice and clear still.
What people call styrofoam is often expanded polystyrene foam, and we make billions of dollars worth of it every year.
Many think it can't be recycled, but it can. And that's likely because less than 1% of it gets recycled, even though we make enough to fill more than 700 Empire State Buildings every year. And now one company has found a way to turn all this trash into treasure, or rather, photo frames. But why are more companies doing this? We went to Mexico City to find out.
New materials, countless in their numbers and variety, have been created.
Styrofoam is actually a brand developed by the Dow Chemical Company and now owned by DuPont. It only refers to a kind of plastic used in construction and insulation. There's actually no such thing as a styrofoam cup. Instead, it's expanded polystyrene foam that is a kind of plastic scientists first created in the 1940s. Today, it's estimated that this kind of foam takes up about 30% of the world's landfills. A company called Renueva has found a way to make money recycling this cheap product. Corporations pay Renueva to handle their polystyrene waste, and regular people can drop off their own at the company's facility. It also hosts collection efforts like this one at a local university. All told, Hector and his team handle 16 metric tons of plastic per week.
Creo que el mayor reto fue que no había mucha información al respecto. De hecho, no podías encontrar un libro que dijera libro para fabricar máquinas de reciclaje de poliestireno. Y el mayor reto fue encontrar el proceso que nos permitiera que todo fuera lo mismo, estandarizarlo, ¿no?
Workers first grind the material to make it easier to manage. Then they apply heat and pressure in a process called densification, which squeezes out excess air, leaving reusable plastic behind. In terms of size, the ratio of pre-densified foam to post-densified foam is about 90:1. A machine heats the material and molds it into these spaghetti-looking strips. The company uses a chemical that's a bit like antifreeze to cool the strips, and finally a machine dices them into rice-sized pellets. Renueva sells these pellets to companies like Marcos y Marcos, which turns them into frames. The process is actually pretty similar to Renueva's. You heat the pellets, mold them, and then assemble and decorate the frames accordingly.
Hay marcos que requieres 45 vasitos de unicel para hacer un marco tamaño carta. Entonces, realmente se aprovecha bastante bien.
This factory can process 6 tons of raw material per day and has actually recycled some of its own old frames. Different companies use Renueva's pellets to make heels for shoes and to make more foam. Renueva is working on making plates and cutlery, but first it needs to make sure the recycled plastic is safe for food. That's because polystyrene foam could pose some health risks. Scientists have found that foam containers are generally safe to eat off of, but some chemicals can transfer into your food or drink, and they can be harmful over a long period of time. And breathing in foam particulates is dangerous. The International Agency for Research on Cancer says one of the main components of polystyrene is a probable carcinogen, though the EPA hasn't classified it as such. Hector and his team are realistic. They know this kind of plastic isn't going anywhere soon. So their solution to waste relies on a circular economy. Reduce trash by reusing it.
Problemática con muchos plásticos es la falta de unión de eslabones entre fabricantes, distribuidores, usuarios y recicladores.
Most recycling facilities don't handle polystyrene foam, and as a result, many people simply throw the product away. Renueva has outreach programs to let people know the product can be recycled.
¿Cómo los involucramos? A través de pláticas, a través de capacitaciones, a través de educación ambiental, y empezamos a ir a escuelas, a dar conferencias.
The company says that it now recycles 5% of the polystyrene foam used in Mexico City. but we were unable to independently verify that fact.
Pues lo que queremos es que la gente esté educada para que todos sepan que el material se recicla y más que eso, que todos tengan esta conciencia de que si lo utilizas, tienes que hacerte cargo de lo que utilizas.
Renueva has recycled 1,200 metric tons of foam since its founding in 2014, a small fraction of the amount produced worldwide every year. That helps explain why everyone isn't copying the Renueva model. Most polystyrene products are cheap, in part because more than 90% of them is just air. It makes them very light, but also means you need a lot to make recycling profitable. They're also often covered in food waste and can break apart really easily, which makes them tough to process. There are a few similar facilities that run on the Renueva model, like this one in China. Or the Canadian company StyroGo, which uses mobile trucks to densify polystyrene foam on site. But many people around the world are pushing to simply end the use of foam rather than figure out how to recycle it. The European Union, China, Costa Rica, and US states like New York and Colorado have all announced or implemented bans on single-use plastics like polystyrene foam. Mexico City banned single-use plastics starting in 2021, but that doesn't include polystyrene foam. So the product is everywhere, and it fuels the Central de Abasto, one of Mexico City's largest wholesale food markets.
Descargamos un camión o 2 camiones al día de este producto de unicel.
Food vendors like Irene depend on that product's low price.
Los vasos, todo es mucho más económico. El biodegradable se disparan los precios.
That's why plastic bans don't always have the intended effects.
Al contrario, hay un impacto ambiental un poco grave porque este impacto lo que hace es que la ley no va enfocada al consumo, va enfocada a la sustitución de la mercancía. Cuando tú sustituyes una mercancía es ya no consumo plástico, pero ahora consumo papel.
This supports Renueva's main idea, that single-use plastics should be recycled. According to Hector, the solution to all the plastic sitting in our landfills is to use the plastic sitting in our landfills. And any environmental action that doesn't make economic sense isn't realistic.
No se habla de desarrollo sustentable en muchas políticas públicas o temas de este estilo porque solo se enfocan al medio ambiente, pero dejan desprotegida a la sociedad y a la economía. Y la realidad es que pues, no podemos nadar contra la corriente de salirnos de un esquema económico.
Himalayan salt doesn't actually come from the Himalayas. It's mined 186 miles away in Pakistan. Thanks to its pink hue and supposed health benefits, the salt has exploded in popularity since the late 2000s. Today, it's turned into lamps, statues, and of course, table salt. But extracting the coveted salt means descending into dark caves, then blasting and carrying heavy rock.
अच्छा हमें प्रॉब्लम जो माइंस से आता है जो ब्लॉक्स के जो साइजेस होते हैं बेसिकली हमारे पास इतनी अच्छी फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं है हमारी माइंस के अंदर कि हम जो ब्लॉक्स को बहुत अच्छे तरीके से उसको एक्सट्रैक्ट कर सकें.
We went inside the mine, turning this mountain into 400,000 tons of pink salt each year. The Keoda salt mine, here in the Punjab region of Pakistan, is the second largest salt mine in the world. The pink salt comes from remnants of ancient seabeds that crystallized 600 million years ago. Legend has it, it was actually Alexander the Great's horse that first discovered these salt rocks when it stopped to take a lick. Then, under British rule, salt mining ramped up in the 1870s. Today, it's a popular tourist destination and a working mine, producing the majority of the world's pink salt. All the mining starts here, at the train station. This train takes miners deep into the mountain. Here, tunnels stretch for 25 miles, and it's always 64 degrees Fahrenheit.
माइन के टोटल 17 लेवल है, इसके 70 लेवल है, 5 लेवल इसके ऊपर चल रहे हैं, 6 ये ग्राउंड फ्लोर है और 11 इसके नीचे है.
300 miners work these dark chambers. They've used many of the same mining tools for over a century: pickaxes, hand drills, and gunpowder.
सबसे पहले हमने ड्रिलिंग की है. ड्रिलिंग यहाँ पे हैंड आगर के जरिए करते हैं. उसके बाद हमने गन पाउडर के जरिए पैकिंग की है. फिर सेफ्टी फ्यूज के जरिए हमने इसको इग्नाइट किया है और साल्ट की ब्लास्टिंग हो चुकी है.
खबरदार आप सब सेट पे हो जाएं. खबरदार आप सब सेट पे हो जाएं.
इसके बाद हम एक महफूज टाइम जो आधा घंटा कम से कम होना चाहिए, उसके बाद हम उसकी साल्टिंग और लोडिंग स्टार्ट कर देंगे.
Miners will spend up to 8 hours underground at a time.
ज़ाहिर बात है हम मैन के नीचे काम कर रहे हैं, तकरीबन 30-40 फुट है.
हार्ड तो है लेकिन यहाँ पे मजदूरी अच्छी और वक्त पे मिल जाती है.
Only half of the mountain salt is actually mined. The rest is used for structural support, so the chambers don't collapse. Tractors haul the mined salt out of the mountain. Each day, miners excavate over 1,000 tons of salt, or about the weight of 157 elephants. Outside, they search for blocks with the best shape and coloring to send to manufacturers. Once picked, the blocks are loaded up on trucks either by hand or crane and sent across Pakistan. Historically, Pakistan couldn't process this raw pink salt, so much of it was exported to India cheaply. India would treat the salt, label it as made in India, and sell it at a premium. Pakistan saw little of the profits. NPR reported that a ton of salt sold to India for $40 could fetch $300 in Europe. In 2019, a social media campaign calling for the end of salt exports to India went viral. That same year, the Pakistani government banned all salt exports to India. The goal? Returning the profits to Pakistan.
23% जो रॉक सॉल्ट की मैन्युफैक्चरिंग थी या जो प्रोडक्शन थी जो पाकिस्तान की वो इंडिया को हम एक्सपोर्ट करते थे रॉ फॉर्म में, जो कि फिर वो री एक्सपोर्ट होती थी ओवरसीज़ में सेम मार्केट में जहां हम ऑलरेडी अभी एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं राइट नाउ. गवर्नमेंट का डिसीजन ये बहुत फ़ायदेमंद है हमारे लिए.
But some Pakistani salt exporters suffered. They didn't speak English and couldn't meet Europe's tough import standards. Only about a dozen exporters saw an opportunity to sell products under Pakistani labels directly to Europe. Mohammed was one of them. Every month he purchases 300 tons of salt from the mine for his company Himalayan International.
ख्योरा माइंड से तकरीबन सॉल्ट लोड होता है ट्रकों में और मुख्तलिफ ट्रकों में लोड होके बारास्ता मोटरवे हमारी फैक्ट्री लाहौर काना डिफेंस रोड पे आता है, जिसका सफ़र 350 किलोमीटर बनता है.
His artists turn these blocks into more than 200 different products.
जैसे कि नेचुरल सॉल्ट लैंप है, इसके साथ साथ ज्योमेट्रिकल शेप्स हैं, एनिमल लिंक सॉल्ट है, ईटिंग कुकिंग प्लेट्स हैं, इसके साथ साथ वॉल्स की जो सी टाइल्स होती हैं वो हम लोग बना रहे हैं. इसके साथ हम लोग ईटिंग सॉल्ट के अंदर काम कर रहे हैं काफ़ी सारा.
Most of the work is done by hand, but drills and saws have sped up the process in recent years.
उसके बाद उसकी क्वालिटी को चेक किया जाता है. चेक करने के बाद उसकी वॉशिंग होती है. वॉशिंग के बाद उसके अंदर बल्ब और उसके अंदर वुडन बेस इंस्टॉल करके उसको पैकिंग के मराहिल में लेके आया जाता है. हमारे पास तकरीबन महीने के अंदर 10 से 15,000 सॉल्ट लैंप्स की प्रोडक्शन है.
Over in Karachi, RM Salt Pakistan grinds up blocks into table salt.
बेसिकली ये इसका रॉ मटेरियल है जो कि डिफरेंट साइजेस में आप देख सकते हैं. यहाँ पर कुछ रेंजेस हैं 2 to 3 kg, 3 to 5 kg और ये हमारी लार्ज साइड पे आ जाता है जैसे 9 to 12 हो गया और 12 to 15 kg हो गया. ये रेंजेस में होते हैं बेसिकली.
Blocks are fed into the grinder and broken down into smaller grains. Workers bag and weigh 1,000 of these pouches of pink salt every hour. Like Mohammed's factory, RM Salt also makes lamps and other specialty products.
After the raw material we get, we convert it with a different shape as per our order. Like you can see in the cutting machine, he is cutting different sizes.
On this saw, water prevents dust from flying up, but on the grinders it's not possible, which is why Mohammed's staff wore masks even before the pandemic. Over at RM Salt,
as you can see this facility, we have installed a vacuum through which we can absorb the dust. This is the order of USA, one of our client. We are making these goods for them, the moon shape and the heart shape as well. डबल ड्रिल के बाद हम लोग इसको वॉशिंग प्रोसेस से गुजारते हैं क्योंकि इसमें हमें मैनुअली काम करना पड़ता है. उसकी वजह है कि इसके साइजेस जो है वो डिफरेंट होते हैं.
The lamps are then coated with a gel to prevent humidity from interacting with the salt, and then they're shrink wrapped. RM Salt ships 30 containers of products every month. Mohammed exports about 80% of his products, primarily to Western countries like the US, UK, and Spain, where demand has spiked in the last decade because of the alleged health benefits.
यहाँ पर 3 कलर का नमक है, वाइट है, रेड है और पिंक है. इसके अंदर वाइट के अंदर है सोडियम क्लोराइड, पिंक के अंदर मैग्नीशियम है और रेड में आयरन शामिल है.
98% तो ये सोडियम क्लोराइड ही है, NaCl है, जो कि नॉर्मली सी सॉल्ट भी है. लेकिन इसके एडिशनली जो बेनिफिट्स हैं वो 84 मिनरल्स जो इसमें होते हैं, जैसे कि कैल्शियम है, मैग्नीशियम है, पोटेशियम है.
However, it's such a very small percentage of the salt that makes up these minerals that you are highly unlikely to get any real benefit or any trace of them in your regular serving of salt itself. But nutritionally, it's pretty much similar to regular salt.
It's also pretty similar tasting to sea salt. But others claim Himalayan salt has healing powers, whether inhaled, used in spa treatments, or in lamp form.
There's a lot of different homeopathic remedies that can seem very, very appealing, but actually they're not grounded in evidence.
And it's these false health claims that have driven the price up. Himalayan salt can cost up to 20 times the price of normal table salt.
Normally जो price start होती है pink salt pouch की, वो normally एक manufacturer से वो 60 cents से शुरू होती है और एक मैं 1 kg बैग की बात कर रहा हूँ जो कि सेल होता है रिटेल मार्केट्स में अराउंड $9 होता है.
But that money doesn't always make it back to the miners. They take home less than 1,500 rupees a day, not much more than the cost of this bag of Himalayan sea salt at Walmart. And those salaries have stayed the same, even though Pakistan has severed its salty relationship with India, and the pink salt is seeing growing demand abroad.
पिंक सॉल्ट की डिमांड इस टाइम पूरी दुनिया में दिन ब दिन बढ़ रही है. मेरा नहीं ख्याल कि इसकी खरीदो फरोख्त में कहीं पे कोई कमी आई है. क्यों कि लोग इसको बेशुमार इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं और दिन ब दिन इसकी फरोख्त बढ़ रही है.
Luckily, the mountain won't run out of salt anytime soon. It's estimated only about 220 million tons of salt have been excavated here, nothing compared to the nearly 6.7 billion tons left. Every year, more than 1 billion flowers come into the US for Valentine's Day. Most come from massive farms in Colombia. But these roses have as little as 48 hours to get cut and flown to Miami before they wilt.
They have a short lifetime and thus require the most rapid form of transportation, and that is by air.
It takes a vast network of farmers, air cargo, coolers, and customs officers working 24/7.
Leading up to Valentine's Day, the amount of flowers coming to the airport double and triple.
Treating these flowers right is even a matter of protecting the US.
The danger of an exotic pest to establish in the United States, our food supply is affected.
From greenhouse to gift, we follow the journey of your Valentine's Day bouquet. 70% of cut flowers imported to the US come from Colombia, from farms like this one. With over 2,800 acres, Elite Flower is the largest privately owned farm in the country. The temperate climate, high altitude, and 12 hours of sunlight create the perfect growing conditions for these blooms.
Producimos alrededor de 800 millones de tallos al año, de los cuales 400 millones, la mitad, son rosas.
That would fill up 414 Boeing 767s. And even within roses, there are 100 varieties. Out in the greenhouse, socially distanced workers inspect each flower from petal to stem for rot or bugs.
Proceso, lo que hacemos es seleccionar la flor por sus colores, por el tamaño de cabeza. Se hace una selección para que haya una consistencia en el armado, se arma el ramo.
Using shears, workers cut each flower off one by one.
Lo que pasa en el metabolismo de la flor es apenas tú la cortas, la flor empieza un proceso de mortalidad.
To slow that decay, the flowers are sent to a cold room for a minimum of 12 hours. This begins what's known as the cold chain.
El éxito es mantener la cadena de frío lo más constante posible, alrededor de los 38 grados Fahrenheit.
Extra leaves and thorns are stripped off the stem using this tool. Workers wear thick gloves to guard themselves from thorns. Elite Flower is buzzing year-round, but it gets especially busy in February. In the weeks leading up to Valentine's Day, the company adds an extra 4,000 employees and generates 90% of its profits. Elite partners with UPS to fly these flowers to the US. Each plane can hold up to 1 million flowers, but airlines like Avianca or Latam are also big flower movers.
89% of all flowers entering the United States by air came through Miami International Airport.
It's an airport!
That's business, that's money.
After a 4-hour journey, this temperature-controlled Latam Airlines flight landed in Miami.
This airplane arrived with more than 50 tons of flowers from Colombia. And then we start to move one of the 23 pallets that we have here to this machine to downloading the flowers.
The flowers end up in this cold warehouse, held at the same temperature as that airplane.
The most important thing for us is to maintain the cool chain.
There are almost 400,000 square feet of cooling facilities at Miami Airport.
That were built because of the flower industry. Flowers represent our largest commodity coming in.
Next, Customs and Border Protection checks flowers from every flight.
Over 84,000 units for inspection here.
Agricultural specialists like Stanley pull just 2% of the flowers from each flight to inspect.
We have a sampling protocol. We know for sure that 2% is representing the 100% of the flowers that are coming in.
Inspections are done quickly, so the flowers don't wilt or get handled too much.
We make sure that our inspection area is cooler. The temperature is good for the flowers and for our personnel.
One by one, officers open up boxes and remove the bundles, wearing PPE to protect against diseases and pesticides.
They take a bouquet of flowers and they remove the plastic and then they shake it gently. They have to get a white background, and if anything falls, they'll have to observe if there is any insect, but at the same time they are doing the visual observation to see whether the leaves have any kind of signs of diseases.
Like a bacterial or fungal disease.
If there's a fungal inspection, you see some rusty patches. She has seen a sign of maybe a disease. Now she has to use a loupe to magnify.
Even more important to look out for, bugs. Leaf miners, caterpillars, fruit flies, and beetles. Critters that may seem harmless, but if they got through, they could wreak havoc on the U.S. agricultural system.
Every year, the United States spends billions of dollars in eradication programs in order to eradicate those pests.
From 2007 to 2014, Florida's orange and grapefruit growers lost $2.9 billion trying to eradicate the Asian citrus psyllid. So if an officer finds something,
we kind of collect it in a vial with alcohol for preservation. That specimen goes to USDA, Department of Agriculture, for identification.
And for the flowers?
The importer has basically three choices. One is to return to origin, two is to fumigate, or third is to destroy.
Destruction is the last resort. Treatment is most often fumigation. In an average day, we find around 50 to 60 different pests.
Some flowers, like the eucalyptus, are high risk for carrying hitchhikers, while roses are less risky.
After the fumigation takes place, then the rest of the shipment can go to the public.
CBP inspects flowers every day, but on Valentine's,
last season we inspected over 700 million stems of flowers.
If CBP officers don't find anything, they bring the flowers back to that cold chain warehouse.
And when the customer arrives here, we take the flowers and go to the delivery area to load the flower directly to the truck.
The majority of these flowers are trucked to the northeast or west coast of the U.S., where folks like you and me can treat our loved ones to a colorful bouquet for Valentine's Day. The shea butter market is booming. While industrially made beauty butters have played an essential role in the industry's growth, women making it the traditional way fear their craft is dying out.
We don't have anything to do. That's why we are doing the shea butter.
International customers often buy larger quantities from companies that can produce it faster, making it harder for traditional farmers. But the biggest threat is right in their backyard. For the past 4 decades, men have been cutting down the very tree that provides livelihood to many families. We traveled to Ghana to find out how, despite the challenges, this group of women artisans is still standing. The day starts with a 2-hour trek to the forest for many women in the town of Yinduri. The journey can be dangerous. They have to travel in groups to avoid armed robbers lurking in the forest. And they risk getting bitten by snakes when walking through the grass.
If you are only 1 or 2 women that goes into the bush to pick, it's likely that you won't come back.
The shea tree grows along a dry savanna belt that stretches from east to west Africa. Only the ripe shea nuts that have fallen from the tree are ready. The return home can also be physically taxing. The women carry more than 25 kilograms of seeds on their heads. They first wash the seeds and let them dry for a week. Then it's time for cracking. The nuts are ready when the kernel starts to rattle against the shell. Only the good ones are made into butter. The bad nuts are used to make a special food called kanwu, and as a fertilizer on their farms. This attention to detail sets traditional shea butter apart from commercially made ones.
With the machinery, you pour everything in the machine. So if there's bad one, you will not be able to identify it
Portia Asumda has led an organization called Titiaca Boresa for the last 3 years. The group provides cooking pots and training for shea farmers in the Talensi district. It also teaches them how to pick the best quality nuts for their product. They crack the nuts into smaller pieces with a brick, then roast them over an open fire until they become fragrant. This helps release the oils that give shea butter its nutty taste and smell. It's one of the skills Acuña Alejere is teaching her daughter. She's been making shea butter for more than half her life. She grinds the shea nut pieces by hand. Some shea farmers have invested in grinding mills to make this step easier. But Acuña takes pride in sticking to the techniques that date back to the 14th century. The divots in these rocks provide the perfect working space. The women only produce small batches at a time to ensure the quality will be consistent. It's all hands on deck when it comes to mixing the shea paste. The work can be grueling and takes a lot of strength. They do this for 1 hour to get the right consistency. The water activates the butter. Slowly, it separates and floats to the top. Acuña melts the butter in another fire, using wood that was harvested in the forest. She waits until it turns a deep chocolate color. The shea oil will cool and be sold as unrefined butter. The first accounts of shea butter use date back to 14th century Burkina Faso. It's been used in West African households as a cooking fat and as a moisturizing salve for skin. Legend has it that even the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra appreciated the butter for its hydrating power. In recent decades, global demand for shea butter has increased dramatically. Its healing properties and high levels of vitamins have made it the ultimate ingredient for skincare products across the world. In the last 20 years alone, annual exports have increased 600%. But with new demand have come new challenges. Deforestation, competition from bigger companies, and a global pandemic have threatened the livelihoods of small-scale shea farmers.
We used to get supplies from other countries like Canada, US, UK. But when COVID-19 came, we never had orders again.
Faster, machine-run shea processing plants in Ghana have also begun taking over the market, making it difficult for this group of women to keep up. It takes them an entire month to produce what a big factory can do in 3 days. Deforestation is also an ongoing battle. Since the 1990s, men have been cutting down shea nut trees to make charcoal for commercial use. Around 8 million trees are cut each year.
The quantity we used to get, now we don't get it that way again. It has reduced drastically.
Shea butter making has sustained generations of women in Ghana. Today, many depend on it as their only source of income.
Mostly with this group, most of them are widows. They used to say widows, they can't do anything for their own. But now that they have their own handwork, they are able to do something and earn money and take home.
Organizations like Portia's teach traditional shea farmers how to produce better quality butter and understand its value in the local market. With this knowledge, they can take home a higher profit from their sales.
ɛde ɛtɔ aduane ma wɔn ɛde ɛtɔ nneɛma bibia nti ama nam ne no wɔ hɔ gye na ɛnyɛ sɛ bata adwuma koraa kam ne bibia mo wɔ hɔ koraa.
The organization is also working to combat deforestation. Over the last 2 years, it's planted 7,000 shea trees in hopes of repopulating the parklands. Although there are many challenges, Portia sees a bright future ahead.
That is our business. That is what we do. Even though it is hard to produce it, but that is where we get our money from. That is where we get our income.
Young women are still interested in learning the craft, and she hopes that expanding her business will give more opportunities to people looking to learn the skill in its traditional form.
We like to have our own plantations. We like to have our own warehouses where we can keep our shea nuts there.
For women here, shea butter is a symbol of prosperity and independence, and they're determined to pass it on to the younger generation.
Americans spend billions of dollars each year making their teeth a little whiter. In Beverly Hills, California, one whitening treatment can set you back $750.
I am obsessed with having my teeth be pearly white, and about 8 years ago, I tried those drugstore whitening strips, and I think they did a really good job whitening my teeth. The only cons were that it took about 2 weeks, they stung my gums a bit, and they left my teeth feeling very sensitive a few weeks after. I've never tried any professional whitening service, but I know a lot of dentists use this service called Zoom Teeth Whitening, and it's supposed to be an hour-long service that gives you instant white teeth. So today we're in Beverly Hills visiting dentist Kevin Sands, and he's worked on countless Hollywood smiles, and today he's working on mine. So let's see if Zoom is worth it. Right when you walk in, you see the office decorated with magazine covers of the many celebrities Sands has worked on. First, like any medical office, I had to sign important paperwork. Then I met with Sands to hear all about the treatment.
So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a layer of the bleach to your teeth. The Zoom is a UVA, UVB light that activates the product and whitens the enamel of your teeth.
How is this different from like regular whitening strips?
Well, first of all, regular whitening strips, they do work, but they don't have as much of the active ingredient to to really whiten your teeth the way people want them.
That active ingredient is hydrogen peroxide, which is about 25% of Zoom's whitening product. After some research online, I found that common drugstore whitening strips, for example, Crest White strips, have hydrogen peroxide levels ranging from about 6 to 14%. How many shades wider can you get someone's teeth with Zoom?
Okay, well, depending on each individual, you can get 1 shade lighter up to 5 to 10 shades lighter. It just depends how much enamel you have, your lifestyle. People that drink a lot of coffee and red wine aren't going to get as good of a result. And also patients that don't have a lot of enamel don't get the best results either.
At Sands' office, he offers the service for $750. However, he mentioned it doesn't work on veneers, crowns, or decaying teeth. The results usually last about 6 months, but that all depends on your lifestyle and cleaning regimen. Once I knew what I was getting myself into, Sands brought in his assistant Megan to perform the treatment. First, we examined my teeth to find the best shade.
Nope, you're definitely not there. And you're not there. You have really nice shade going on now, so you're already in the bleaching category. I would put you about a BL3 or a BL4. So you're already in the category of being really light. So hopefully we can get you to somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes, that one.
We wear these glasses. These protect your eyes from the UV light that we're going to use. We're going to apply some vitamin E oil to your lips. All the Zoom kits come with this. It's just a nice way so that your lips don't get dehydrated during the treatment. The next thing I'm going to do is put this retractor. It's going to expand. It looks a little intense, but it's not really. So I'm going to have you open as wide as you can. So it's also important we keep everything really dry. So I'm gonna insert some cotton here, and then we're gonna apply this towel. It just protects your skin. This is a protective ingredient that we're gonna put on your gums to protect them. So none of the bleaching gel will touch your gums. And now we're gonna apply the actual bleaching solution. So it's 25% hydrogen peroxide, okay? So it's really strong, so you wanna make sure you don't put your fingers up near your teeth while this is going on.
It feels really relaxing. I don't feel discomfort, like, or don't feel the LED light, and I don't taste the gel or anything. So it's good.
The solution is removed after about 15 minutes. For my teeth, we did a second round of whitening. Some teeth require 3 or 4 rounds for best results.
It feels a little more sensitive.
A little tingly on the lower front teeth, or where are you?
Yeah.
That's the most common area to start to get sensitive. And it's just because the teeth are dehydrated.
Once those 15 minutes were up, my teeth had to be cleaned before I could see the results.
You don't see like the little yellows that I used to have around like the rims of the teeth, like the gum.
You got a beautiful result.
Yay! I love it. Wow, so what were my teeth like before?
So before we started, you were in this shade range, BL4. It's a nice shade, but we definitely increased your shade dramatically to a BL1, which is the lightest shade possible. And you just want to, avoid dark colored foods and liquids for 24 hours.
Okay.
And after that, back to normal.
I've had my pearly white teeth for a few weeks now and I've been enjoying them. But here's the thing, in real life, I can see the difference and I've had a lot of people compliment on my teeth. But when I look at the before and after pictures, it's a little hard for me to tell. I think it's because I started with pretty white teeth already. But the major change I see is whitening around the edges of my teeth. That's the areas I should be flossing more. Overall, if you have stained teeth, probably a little bit more yellowish than what I had, and you have 0 time to wait and you want instant white teeth in under an hour, then I think it's worth trying Zoom and seeing how the results last. For me, I realized that it's probably smarter to stick with the more affordable drugstore options, even if it takes some time and I might feel some sensitivity a few weeks after, but I think I'll see similar results while saving myself some cash.
This machine is extracting the slime from snails in the name of beauty. It will end up in skincare products around the world to repair and moisturize the skin. Historically, the way to get snail mucin was by killing them. But new machines like this one stimulate the snails instead. Companies around the world have adopted the technology. Here in Italy, snail farming has reportedly increased by more than 300% over the past 2 decades. Just in time for an almost $4 billion snail beauty market to take off.
E la richiesta del prodotto è incredibile.
Advocates often claim their products can improve wrinkles and texture. But can snail slime really do all that? And how has it become such a big business? Simone Sampo always knew he wanted to be a snail expert.
Bambini tradizionali giocavano a pallone, giocavano degli sport. Il mio hobby era proprio quello di andare a raccogliere questo mollusco. Da qua a 20 anni lascio economia e commercio per dedicarmi alla professione di elicicoltore.
He's led the International Institute of Heliciculture in the northern Italian town of Carrasco since 2016.
L'Italia è un paese favorevole alla crescita di questo mollusco.
Through the Institute, Simone helped develop methods that create ideal conditions to grow and harvest snails. And they haven't exactly been moving at a snail's pace. Simone says they've seen a huge increase in demand.
People are trying to opt for what is known as clean beauty, kind of more organic, plant-derived, animal-derived products.
It all starts in rooms like this one.
In questo modo, quando c'è questo gonfiore, è perché questa è una chiocciola piena di uova, quindi
The eggs hatch after about 2 weeks. And then go to an incubation room. The Institute sells the baby snails to farmers who raise them outdoors, using methods developed by the Institute. Simona Basile is one of them. She started out in 2019 with about 33,000 snails.
Io comincio a bagnare alle 6. Ho visto che la vegetazione non viene tanto rovinata, quindi bagnando dalle 6 fino alle 8 loro si svegliano e poi gli metto da mangiare.
The snails mostly eat vegetables like cabbage and spinach. They are also fed a supplement containing corn, soy, and other flours to strengthen their shells. Once the snails reach adulthood after about 1 year, farmers can sell them back to the Institute or to private buyers. Simona will take these 11-pound boxes to the Institute.
la bava la utilizziamo nella farmaceutica per dei gastroprotettori, per gli sciroppi per la tosse, per prodotti per le dermatiti.
As for the slime, it's what helps snails move and protect themselves against small predators. But it also contains antioxidant properties that are said to repair skin damage. So, how do heliculturists get snail slime for beauty products? It's a centuries-old practice. But back in the day, the snails had to be killed for the slime to be extracted. The tale goes that Greek physician Hippocrates applied crushed snails to treat skin inflammations. Later on, snails were dunked in pots of salt water and vinegar that forced them to release the slime. That is, until it was discovered snails would also release slime if they were stimulated. So, Simone spent years developing this machine to get them to release the mucus without killing them. He describes it as a little spa for snails. The steel structure has 2 domes that can fit about 44 pounds of snails. The snails are first cleaned with water and ozone. Then they're sprayed with an acidic solution that makes them release the slime as a defense mechanism. The Institute says this process doesn't cause harm to the animals. The machine extracts about 118 ounces of slime during the 1-hour process.
All'interno è già presente l'acqua e il siero di bava di lumaca. Noi andremo ad aggiungere la fragranza e gli attivi per poi completare la nostra formula.
It will then be distributed through the Institute's Lumidea brand to 7 countries. It sells for about $60. But that's not the end of it. The snails go through this process about 3 or 4 times before they are euthanized with a highly concentrated solution of ozonated water.
Utilizziamo tutto di questo animaletto, un po' come il maiale. Nulla si spreca e tutto si trasforma. In che modo?
The intestines are used for gourmet dishes. The shells for cosmetic products. and the eggs to make snail caviar. The products are distributed through the Lumaceria Italiana company, which Simone also leads.
Il mercato del food la fa ancora da padrona. Si pensa che nei prossimi 7 anni il mercato della cosmesi raggiungerà sicuramente il mercato del food.
Part of it may have to do with the rising global influence of K-beauty. South Korea is one of the top 10 beauty markets in the world. It's established itself as a snail cream superpower. And North America is projected to be the fastest growing region for snail beauty products. In the US, brands that use snail mucin have expanded their presence through retailers like Target and CVS. There's also growing demand worldwide for products that protect against aging and pollution. And consumers seem to be gravitating toward natural skincare ingredients. Studies have shown it can treat radiation-induced irritations, wounds, and burns.
I've seen the wound healing benefits and the skin regenerative benefits of using snail mucin after laser procedure.
But the clinical research is limited, and the slime's long-term effectiveness is yet to be seen.
The hope will be that it will move from just this anecdotal kind of idea to something that's more clinically investigated.
Simone has faith in its future. His company says its studies have shown the slime has compounds like allantoin and elastin that repair and moisturize the skin.
Il mio vuole essere un segnale, un richiamo a Elon Musk proprio di dirgli portiamo la nostra chiocciola sullo spazio. Con lei possiamo nutrirci, possiamo curarci, possiamo farci bello.
Also, in the name of health and beauty, people spend over $20 billion a year on bar soap. Here's how Dr. Bronner's became an industry behemoth.
Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps was founded in 1948 and is most famous for its pure Castile soap. The brand produces over 14.3 million bottles a year, and one of the unique things about this soap is that there are supposedly 18 different ways you can use it, including washing your face, body, hair, dogs, laundry, floors, windows, toilets, and even brushing your teeth. But how is all that even possible with one product? Who is Dr. Bronner? And what's up with all that tiny text on the bottles? Here's the story of Dr. Bronner and how his famous soaps are made. Third-generation soap maker Emanuel Bronner started the company over 70 years ago. The company is still run by the Bronners, who work hard to keep their family's soap-making tradition alive. Let's start with how they make their soap. All of Dr. Bronner's soaps are pure Castile soaps, meaning they're made out of vegetable oils like organic olive, hemp, and coconut oils instead of animal fats. In 2003, Dr. Bronner's became certified USDA organic, and it went fair trade in 2007 for its major raw ingredients. That means the company works with producers in developing countries to sustainably source ingredients while paying fair wages and ensuring that employees are treated ethically. Once all the ingredients are sourced, they arrive to the factory in Vista, California. To get a bit sciencey here, saponification is the chemical reaction of making soap. The vegetable oil has 3 fatty acids that are connected to glycerin, a moisturizing property in soap. It's mixed with an alkali, which is sodium hydroxide for bar soaps and potassium hydroxide for liquids. In this case, let's do liquid soaps. With heat and pressure in the soap reactor, the alkali separates the fatty acids from the glycerin and converts them to soap. So in the end, you're left with glycerin, soap, and water left behind after the alkali has reacted. Essential oils like peppermint, lavender, and tea tree are added to the mix for aromatherapy and also to treat certain skin conditions. Its most popular scent is peppermint, which can cool the skin and clear sinuses. Once everything is mixed together, the soap is cooled before it can be bottled. Soap is filled into various sized bottles in its facilities. Although the company mainly uses automated machinery, some mini and gallon-sized bottles are still filled by hand. And now, on to making the bar soaps. Organic palm oil is first sustainably sourced from Ghana. That's what helps harden the soap bar. The palm oil is mixed with coconut oil and turned into a soap bar base. The bar base looks like tiny pellets, kind of like feta cheese. Those pellets are mixed with an essential oil. In this case, it's tea tree oil. Tea tree oil can help reduce acne and dandruff. The soap base is triple milled, meaning the pellets are ground 3 times. During the last grind, it goes under a vacuum where the bar soap is extruded in one long line. The bars are cut, molded, and finally wrapped in a Dr. Bronner's label and boxed. Now you're probably wondering, what's up with the label? If you've ever come across a Dr. Bronner's soap bottle or bar, you've probably found yourself reading that long, sometimes confusing, tiny text in the shower. Well, the story goes all the way back to World War II and has shaped the mission of the company. Founder Emanuel Bronner immigrated to the United States from Germany in 1929. And in the 1930s, when Hitler came into power, he tried to get his parents to leave Germany, but they decided to stay.
My grandfather received a letter from his father after he was deported to Theresienstadt. A letter from Theresienstadt, all the words were blacked out except for 3 words, "You were right." And my grandfather never heard from his dad again.
Bronner reacted with a message of love instead of hate or revenge, and went in pursuit of his peace plan called the Moral ABC. He wanted to spread the message of unity over religious and ethnic differences, preaching, quote, "We are all one or none." He adopted an honorific doctor title and started giving impassioned speeches on the steps of the University of Chicago. But authorities eventually arrested him and put him in a mental institution. Bronner escaped and hitchhiked to Pershing Square in Los Angeles. He started spreading his peace plan there.
For the people who came to listen to him, he made for them a bottle of soap with no label that he could hand out as a thank you present. And word got out that this soap was really darn good. So people were coming and taking the soap and not listening to him. That's when he got the brilliant idea of taking his philosophy and putting it on the label so that when people would come, take the soap and leave, they'd take that soap in the shower and they'd be stuck. For this generation, we're really trying to take those ideals that my grandfather wrote on the label and really apply it to everything we do.
That doesn't apply just to their organic soaps, but to other areas of the brand as well. The company donates to causes supporting regenerative organic agriculture, animal advocacy, drug policy and criminal justice reform, and fair pay. That is all tied back to Bronner's all-one philosophy that the company still promotes through its soap.
One of the most expensive beauty products out there are wigs. Just one can cost more than $1,000. The priciest are made of natural hair, but those can have a dark origin.
Nguyen Thi Van travels more than 50 miles a day through the streets of Hanoi. This client sold 2 years of growth for just $7.
Hôm nay cắt tóc ván là đóng học cho cháu thiếu tiền.
But how does hair that costs as little as $7 in Vietnam end up selling for thousands in salons around the world? We went to the streets of Vietnam to investigate this global business. Nguyen Thi Van attracts clients with a recorded broadcast.
Thì nó cũng vất vả, đi trên đường thì nó cũng vất vả, nắng mưa thì nó cũng vất vả chứ.
She quit her job as a mosaic worker nearly a decade ago.
Thấy các chị em ở nhà ở làng đó thì là cũng đi thì là cũng đi kiếm cũng được thì là cũng đi thôi, đi từ ngày đấy.
Now, Nguyen earns up to $300 a month. That's a bit more than the average income in Vietnam. She decides how much to offer based on the seller's age, the length, texture, color of their hair, and whether it's been dyed. Nguyen regularly stops by hair salons. If they have clippings that are at least 4 inches long, she makes an offer.
Mấy cả nó ngắn, thì mua thì phải rẻ hơn ở dân. Ở dân là tóc nó dài mà cả nó đen nó không bị nhuộm ý thì là mình về mình bán được đắt hơn thì là mình mua đắt hơn.
She bought this hair for about $2 and sold it for about $4. Today, Nguyen is buying hair from Vũ Thị Tham at her home.
Tôi chỉ đi bán rau, sáng đi ra chợ sớm để mua buôn bán lẻ, kiếm mấy đồng về nuôi các cháu. Tôi hôm nay cắt tóc bán là đóng học cho cháu thiếu tiền.
It took her 2 years to grow her hair this long, but the bundle was shorter than last time.
Mỗi năm thì cắt được nhiều, nhưng năm nay để cắt ngang nó rẻ hơn, thiếu được có 150.000 mỗi. Chị thì hỏi người ta thì người ta chỉ bảo là chỉ làm tóc để đội thôi, còn chị không hiểu rõ.
Nguyen told Insider she sold the hair to a buying agent for $11 and said her markup is between 20% and 50%.
It's a completely unregulated industry for a start, so there's no sort of who decides what the value of hair is. So generally it's the person who's buying the hair who's trying to get it for as cheap a cost as possible.
Emma Tarlow is a professor of anthropology who has studied the global hair trade.
Hair is such an incredibly intimate fibre. It's actually a body part, but it's also a body product at the same time. And I was fascinated how something that is so intimate could actually be commodified and travel around the world and end up on the head of somebody else.
Vietnam exported $7.6 million worth of hair products like wigs and weaves in 2019. That's almost nothing compared to China, where exports added up to more than $1 billion. China is also one of the most controversial markets. In 2020, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized shipments of hair extensions from the country in response to allegations of forced labor by the U.S. government. This company markets its products as ethical because it pays good wages and doesn't use forced labor. Director Phan Thi Thuy says they pay up to $550 a month, which is above average.
Hiện tại các sản phẩm của chúng tôi là tóc, nguyên liệu tóc làm từ nguyên liệu tự nhiên và được xuất khẩu ra khoảng 70 quốc gia trên thế giới.
The factory only uses human hair, while others mix it with synthetic or animal hair.
Đây là các sản phẩm weft của chúng tôi.
This is one of the more expensive products in the factory, a 20-inch blonde weft that sells for $105. The factory owner told Insider they charge higher prices for products that reflect their responsible practices. The owner said they only buy hair from vendors who have been working with them for more than a decade. But Phan is aware that many people selling their hair live in poverty.
Đặc biệt là các cái vùng dân tộc thì người phụ nữ buộc phải cắt đi mái tóc của mình.
People don't part with their hair unless they need money, usually, unless, of course, they're parting with it for religious reasons.
That's the case in India, where Hindu devotees donate their hair to temples that later auction it to factories.
There's this kind of desire for human hair. They want it to be human, but they don't want the human story that goes with the hair, because that human story often involves poverty, hardship.
Karen Mitchell has been selling hair for more than 15 years.
Although it's mostly Indian hair, but we do sell some imported hair from Malaysia, some European hair in small quantities for my clients who want their Jewish wig, which are called shaitels.
She says she has high-profile clients like Lizzo and Rihanna.
The clientele is very diverse. I mean, I would say it's probably in Manhattan 65 to 70% Black women, but we have a lot of like Caucasian women, Asian women, Hispanic women, Indian women.
Before the pandemic, the value of the global hair trade was growing at around 15% a year. It totaled $1.3 billion in 2019. Anything made with natural hair is labeled as luxury, and some of her extensions cost up to $2,000.
We sell what's considered to be the Rolls Royce of hair extensions. We sell luxury hair extensions.
Mitchell also sells to hairstylists like Carrie Jolie. She knows which country the hair comes from, but that's about it.
For all the techniques that I do, I always recommend using the human hair because it lasts longer, durable as far as like in between shampoos, the hair won't tangle as long as it's good quality.
So this will go on the top.
You're investing in, your hair, so you want it to last longer so that you can reuse it and reuse it.
Lorraine Pierre spends up to $200 a month on hair extensions. Real hair lasts longer and feels more natural than plastic, but it comes with a high cost. For Nguyen, it's just business.
Không, tôi chả bao giờ tôi hỏi, tức là người ta gọi thì là mình mua thì tôi còn chẳng bao giờ hỏi.
Portugal produces about half of the world's cork wine stoppers. Most come from these trees, here in the Alentejo region. But harvesting a tree takes years of expertise and steady hands.
Há que ter paciência. Com varilhas, como a gente cá chama, que é 2 homens, para se ajudarem um ao outro, com muito cuidado para não dar cabo das árvores.
We went inside the world's largest cork forest to see how Portugal produces 40 million cork stoppers a day. These are cork oak trees. They're so special. They've been protected under Portuguese law since 1209, so harvesters have strict rules to follow. The trees can't be touched for the first 15 years of their lives, and they can only be harvested every 9 years, so the bark has time to grow back in between. Since the first 2 harvests of a new tree don't produce the best cork, harvesters have to wait 33 years to get the good stuff. Every summer, harvesters peel off the bark using century-old techniques.
Sim, isto é machadas próprias para tirar a cortiça. Já se experimentou com máquinas, as máquinas não dão, porque depois o homem tem que ir lá na mesma tirar a cortiça.
Only the outer layer can be harvested.
Normalmente, quando se aprende a tirar a cortiça, aprende-se que a primeira machadada que está no sobrego tem que ser devagar, para ver a grossura da cortiça. É muito difícil, tem muita ciência para se tirar, para no fim as árvores não saírem feridas. E as árvores são feridas, normalmente começa a entrar umidade, começa a entrar bicho e com o passar dos anos elas vão acabar ou por cair ou por morrer.
To prevent that, workers leave the inner layer untouched.
We can harvest the bark of the tree without damaging the bark, so these cells can grow again without any impact in the life of the tree.
Because the trees regenerate, they'll never run out of cork. The oldest tree on record is an estimated 200 years old and has been harvested 20 times in its lifetime. After the cork planks are stripped from the trees, they're pressed between concrete slabs for 6 months. Then they're sent to a processing facility to be boiled for at least an hour. That's to sterilize the planks and make them softer. This machine punches out the stoppers we see in our wine bottles. Those corks are shipped out to 100 different countries. But the rest of the cork left behind in this process isn't wasted.
We don't waste anything, even the small residues.
All that byproduct can be made into things like flooring or granulated stoppers, used to cork less expensive wines. Cork harvesting goes back millennia. Egyptians used stoppers in tombs, and the Romans used cork in shoes. Today, Portugal harvests 100,000 tons of cork every year and owns a third of the cork oak forests in the world.
That is a real retainer of CO2, protected for biodiversity. This tree that separates the south of Europe and North Africa from the Sahara Desert, so it's a barrier to desertification.
Cork sustainability was part of what saved the Portuguese wine stopper. In the early 2000s, winemakers began turning to synthetic closures and screw tops for bottles, and the value of cork plummeted. But as consumers became more environmentally conscious in the 2010s,
the movement against single-use plastics that is happening all over the world, it's a real opportunity for cork.
Cork exports grew 52.3% in nearly a decade. In 2018, Portugal passed a record $1 billion worth of cork exports.
Exports, we kept that number and very close to 1.1 billion in 2019, and now we are waiting for the final numbers of 2020. But as a global pandemic, as a global crisis, we are expecting also some impact in our business.
Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2020 harvest didn't stop.
The cork harvest this year happened very smooth. We are talking about an activity that it's done at open air, it's out.
The industry's success in the last decade has allowed Portugal to take its cork products into other industries.
From construction to automotive industry, to aerospatial, to sports, fashion, clothes.
But even as cork demand continues to grow, harvesters plan to keep doing things the same way they always have, with a good axe. Just one of these latex mattresses can cost up to $2,600. Here in Guatemala, workers harvesting natural latex fuel a roughly $10 billion industry.
He wakes at 3 a.m. in Suchitepeques, Guatemala. Most of the country is asleep, but this is when latex tree tappers, like Doroteo Blanco, start their day.
Bueno, eso es para aprovechar la humedad de la mañana. Es que el árbol entre más húmedo, pues brota más el látex y ya que picar muy hora del calor, entonces lo que hace es resecarse y no produce, al contrario se coagula y ya no brota.
There are over 1 million rubber trees on the Guatelinda plantation where Doroteo works. In the next 4 hours, he'll extract latex sap from around 700 of them.
Sí, tiene un olor agradable cuando está recién salido del árbol. Las herramientas que cargo acá para elaborar, principalmente lo que es la cuchilla que utilizamos para trabajar y un desinfectante, ¿sí? Que cargamos acá para desinfectar la cuchilla. Si acaso el árbol está enfermo, se desinfecta para no contagiar al otro árbol. Y con este ganchito que tenemos acá es el que utilizamos para marcar la línea y no abusar del consumo establecido. Porque recordemos que en este año comemos acá y el próximo año, después de acá, volvemos a comer enseguida de esto.
Doroteo carves a careful spiral in the bark of this tree, letting the sap drip out. His technique is incredibly precise, something he's honed over 20 years on the job.
Porque si nos metemos mal, lo que tiende es a chuparse o a encogerse el árbol, entonces se hace una grieta ahí y se daña el árbol. Se hacen unos nudos y ya no se puede cortar en los años siguientes. Ya nos perjudicaría después. Entonces, la profundidad donde tenemos que manejar y trabajar es a 2 milímetros.
Then he waits.
Once y media, mediodía, entonces tenemos un lapso aquí que es así como de 4 o 5 horas de goteo y el árbol suelta lo que tiene y logramos recoger hasta litro o litro y medio por árbol.
But judging how long that break should be is a balancing act. If he collects the liquid latex too late, it may congeal into less valuable crumb rubber, a material good for things like car tires, but useless for mattresses. During the summer low season, an average of 140 litres of natural latex slowly seep into Doroteo's buckets every morning, double that in winter.
Se están picando entre 600 a 700 árboles. Se cortan un aproximado de 3 árboles por minuto. Depende de la velocidad del trabajador. Hasta uno llegamos a cortar 4. Con el hecho de cortar un árbol no quiere decir que ya puedo picar. O sea, tengo que conocer todo lo que es el árbol para yo ser un picador. Porque yo puedo venir y corto el árbol, pero no sé qué estoy haciendo. Entonces, para uno meterse bien a lo que es el árbol, uno tiene que darle corazón y centrarse. Y como un mes me llevé para ir aprendiendo. Y de hecho, aún sigo aprendiendo porque en la vida uno todavía sigue uno aprendiendo. Pues.
Everything the tappers collect then goes straight to a nearby processing facility. Factory workers consolidate the morning's haul into tanks. They let it sit for 12 hours before processing it in a centrifuge to separate the rubber from the water. Then they wait another 45 days for this concentrated latex to stabilize. This will be turned into foam through a method called the Dunlop process. It's based on a 19th century process for turning liquid latex into foam and is the most energy-efficient method. It involves, first, mixing the liquid latex with a combination of stabilizers. This concoction is then whipped up into foam in this machine until it's the preferred density. Then, workers add a gelling agent and heat the foam with radio waves to harden or vulcanize the latex. Every week, about 40 tons of liquid latex foam moves from the processing facility to the mattress core factory. They need about 50 kilos of liquid latex to make one 30-kilo mattress. Once the core sets, workers wash, dry, and squish the mattress cores for packaging. This factory produces around 600 mattresses per week. These particular cores will be shipped to a facility in Los Angeles where they'll be processed into the final mattresses and sold by the company Avocado. This core factory, centrifuge facility, and plantation are all part of Grupo Fortaleza, a group dedicated to the sustainable production of liquid latex in southern Guatemala. Christian Close's family has run Guatelinda for over 50 years, only a decade longer than the average rubber tree can be tapped. Workers take care of Guatelinda's 2,000 acres of rubber trees.
We are certified FSC. FSC stands for Forest Stewardship Council. Basically, you have to have no child labor, you have to only use organic products, you have to abide the laws of your country, and different things to certify that you're sustainable.
The facilities are also GOLS, or Global Organic Latex Standard, certified. Products that carry the label must be made from 95% or more certified organic latex. These certifications add value to the final product, and consequently, zeros to the price tag. The rise of the auto industry in the early 1900s caused the demand for rubber to explode and plantations to pop up in places like Southeast Asia and Central and South America. But a rapid increase in production quickly led to falling prices, which often came at the expense of indigenous populations forced to work these forests, sometimes at the threat of violence. Since then, the world market for natural rubber has fluctuated greatly, usually moving in tandem with the demand for automobiles.
In 2010, the price was very high, so a lot of people started planting rubbers, started buying a lot of land, and started acquiring a lot of debt. In the last 10 years, it's been fluctuating, and right now, it's not at career low, but I would say there are very low prices right now because of all the war in Russia and Ukraine and all the sanctions being put in China and the lack of production in China as well. It has reduced the commodity price of natural rubber.
It's times like these that plantation workers are most at risk of exploitation, which is what certifications like GOLS attempt to incentivize companies not to do. In 2021, the global latex mattress market was valued at $9.7 billion. By 2030, that number could double to around $20 billion. But maintaining the high standards that justify the mattress's final price tag isn't easy.
In our history of planting trees, we've been through 2 or 3 hurricanes. When there's too much rain, you can't really harvest anything. You cannot tap because all the sap that's coming out of the tree, it turns to wash off. Second thing, it destroys roads, so you can't really transport anything. And third, well, people suffer a lot when the rivers tend to grow and they cannot go to work because everything is flooded.
The opposite can also be devastating.
If there's drought, if it's too dry, the rubber trees cannot produce enough latex for us to tap.
workers on unregulated plantations can be exposed to harsh working conditions like 12-hour days, below minimum wages, and toxic chemicals.
Because we're keen on getting premiums, we are usually profitable. So we can keep the jobs of our workers, we can keep tapping, and we can keep adding value to our latex.
Gemstones are an estimated $32 billion industry, but extracting them can be dangerous. In Afghanistan, miners use risky methods to hunt for jewels, and 90% of those jewels leave the country illegally.
The province of Kunar was one of the deadliest places in Afghanistan.
او مزدوري درته زموږ په ولایت کې داسې مزدوري نشته چې موږ لاړ شو خپله مزدوري وکړو او موږ خپل بچو دپاره خپل ځان دپاره یو رزق پیدا کړو.
Decades of fighting forced thousands of families to flee their homes. But Habib and his 9 cousins grew up around here and know every inch of these mountains. Habib hikes for 10 hours to reach a campsite nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. They'll live here mining for the next month.
د ښه معدن خاصیت کان خاصیت دا دی چې دا شوګر ولري دا سوخته ولري.
Habib first spotted tourmaline in these mountains 25 years ago. Now, with decades of experience, the 55-year-old is the leader of his group. And with that short prayer, the men are ready to crawl down 300 feet. The veins are actually magma that cooled under high pressure, creating emerald and tourmaline. They're already 300 feet deep, and they can't go any farther without air. This narrow tube pumps their oxygen from a ventilator above ground. Inhaling all this dust can scar workers' lungs for life.
ځکه دې کې بمونه خلاص شوي انفجار شوی هغه اکسیجن نه لري چې ته ورشي.
But nothing stops these men. Today, they're going even deeper into the mine because they've gotten everything they can from these walls.
موږ چې خپل ځان ګورو لکه د عمر زموږ جون چې کوم یو دی دا په ضلالت کې دی کمزورتۍ کې دی.
چې پکېدلې موږ دی نیسو صحیح ده. دا مسفاب دی دا سامان دی دا دی.
To get farther into the bedrock, they drill holes and fill them with dynamite. The bedrock that contains the gems is often brittle and could easily collapse with heavy drilling. In 2019, 30 miners were buried alive at a gold mine in another province.
د مر سره لوبې دي کنه مر سره لوبې دي کنه دا بمونه دي دا دغه دي موږ داسې مجهزه جامه نه لرو ډېر مړ شو
The dynamite is all set. Now they have less than a minute to get out of this tunnel.
په ټوله ورځ کې زمونږ 3 ساعته نه دی 3 ساعته زمونږ خالي د دمای چې هغه انفجار ورکوو په دې سره چې موږ د سهار چې د مانځه نه وروسته کار شروع کړو تر د ماښام د شپې د 10 11 پورې موږ کار کوو.
They usually go back in to retrieve the gems. But today they left early because they heard the Taliban was on its way. During the 20-year war, the Taliban and other insurgent groups operated most of these mines. Reports suggest they were earning up to $20 million a year smuggling jewels out of the country. And the gems continue to fund the Taliban today, after the group regained control of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, people like Habib struggle to find buyers, since most countries don't openly trade with Afghanistan.
موږ د ماښام ډوډۍ چې وخورو د سهار ته زموږ هېڅ هم نه وي ان دومره فشار او دغه زموږ په خپل په دې ذهنونو پراته وي چې یا الله اوس څه وکړو دلته که معدن نه لاس اخلو.
His only option is selling to local jewelers. He divides the money among his workers. Habib makes about $140 a month, nearly double the average salary in this country. But he has to feed his wife and 12 children. And it's hard to sell his gems for more.
اگه مثل کشورهای دیگه وره درست استخراج شود که درز نداشته باشه اون مقدار قیمتش بالاست.
Noor Ahmad Shirzad has been polishing gems for more than 30 years. He learned the craft from his cousin in Pakistan when his family lived there as refugees during the Afghan Civil War. But he returned in the early 2000s and set up a workshop with his brothers here in Kabul.
به می رقم است. هر دانه که آبدار است، رنگدار است، شفاف است و سایز دانه کلان هم قیمتی است.
He works mostly with blue lapis lazuli.
باز از 10 کیلو ازی 1 کیلو این نگین پاک شدگی میبره. تو که کمک ور فکرت دیگه سوشه نباشه فکرت به کارت انگشت میزنی چشم اوگار میشه متابل چندین بار ما و از آینک اگه استفاده نکنیم.
Noor's younger brother, Amir Ahmad Shirzad, runs the store upstairs. His son helps out before school. They sell everything from dishes to jewelry and sculptures. Amir says he prices items based on the weight of the stones and how long each piece took to make. He even sells the type of stone Habib mines. And he makes these prayer bead necklaces himself. He says business has been tough lately.
قبلا خب خارجی ها بود مشتری‌ها پروازا بود، مشتری‌های ما می آمدن. خارجی هم بود، افغانای خودمون بود، در نمایش‌های بین المللی اشتراک میکردن.
Back in Kanar, when Habib isn't busy mining, he's working on his new home just minutes away from the mines.
منشنه د پټول غواړي د پټه کو نور کاګل نه به کو صفا به کو جوړه به کو چنو به تور کو صفا به کو به په تو ژوند او زندګي ته جوړ شي
دا په څومره وخت باندې تکمیل شو
دا اوس تقریبا یو 15 لشپاړه سورې دی ونیولې دا منګه د جوړه کړه د لاس کو سانو لپاره.
He will no longer have to walk 10 hours to get to work. While he risks his life hunting for gems, it has helped him pay for this new home. And Habib is thankful for that.
ان شاء الله زه الله ته امید لرم چې مړ نه ماغه پر خپل خدمت او ایمانداري کوم.
As with gemstones, pearl jewelry sales are worth billions of dollars. But unlike any other gem, pearls grow inside a living creature, and getting them out is not an easy task.
South Sea refers to the southern portion of the Pacific Ocean. In these waters, just off the coast of Lombok, Indonesia, pearl farms like Afdol Pearl are growing cultured pearls. These are pearls that require a human to put something inside an oyster instead of harvesting naturally occurring pearls. And South Sea pearls are the most expensive variety of cultured pearls. That's in part because of how long it takes to make a South Sea pearl. While some freshwater oysters can churn out dozens of smaller pearls within 3 months, it takes about 5 years to cultivate a single South Sea pearl. The oyster it comes from, the Pinctada maxima, can only make one at a time. And only a fourth of these oysters survive cultivation. That's why the pearl farmers have to go to great lengths to keep the oysters alive. It starts in this highly controlled laboratory, where lab technicians must create the perfect conditions for oyster larvae to grow into healthy, pearl-producing adults. They have to maintain a room temperature of exactly 20 degrees Celsius and feed the larvae the phytoplankton they need to grow. To do this, they combine salt water from the South Sea and sodium hydroxide and store it for 5 days until there's enough plankton. Lab techs feed the plankton to nets of baby oysters and monitor their growth for about 45 days. That's around the time they reach at least 1 millimeter in diameter and are old enough to be transferred to sea. The oysters are transferred to save on the costs of rearing bigger oysters, which can get expensive.
Ya, kalau pelihara di darat harus kita bikin planktonnya. Kita beli plankton, kita bikin. Itu biayanya agak besar dia.
In the South Sea, the oysters get the warm waters and food they need to mature. But this is also where most of them will die, without producing a single pearl.
Itu yang akan hidup nanti cuma 25.000 dari 10.000 itu. 2.500 maksudnya. Karena 75% itu dia pasti meninggal.
That's why pearl farmers have to check on the oysters monthly to ensure they're still growing, eating and healthy. They pull the nets of oysters up from the sea and clean the shells. This helps prevent predators from feeding off the oysters and eventually killing them.
Ya, agar ini kadang kalau kerangnya kotor kan ketutup semua. Jadi susah untuk makan. Di sini banyak lumut, banyak kotoran, banyak bakteri juga. Ada ulat di sini. Kadang-kadang itu yang bisa bikin mutiara jelek. Jadi tujuannya juga untuk kita bangunkan. Kadang-kadang kerang tidak mau bangun.
After up to 2 years of nursing, when the oysters are large enough, implantation can begin. For cultured pearls, implantation is the most important step. When a nucleus is implanted, the oyster sees it as an irritant and reacts by building protective layers of nacre around it. This becomes the pearl. Harry is demonstrating where the nucleus is implanted on an opened oyster.
Terus yang ini inti namanya. Jadi sebelum masukkan ini terbuat dari kulit kerangnya.
He tears the oyster's gonads and injects the nucleus in the middle. He then adds SIBO under the nucleus. SIBO is a mantle tissue cut from another oyster that surrounds the implanted nucleus. It's essential to the pearl quality, and without it, the oyster won't produce any pearls at all. Harry is the only person Afdol trusts with this step. That's because the nuclei don't come cheap. Mahmoud buys the nuclei from Japan, and their cost, in addition to import taxes, takes 20% of his profits. And he says getting import permits for these nuclei is difficult, preventing him from buying enough to expand his business. After the nucleus is implanted, special attention is paid to how the nacre grows around it to avoid a misshapen pearl. They're working towards a large, almost perfectly round pearl. Workers invert the oysters and put them in their protective nets to bring back to sea. The South Sea pearl's unique, soft, satiny luster and thick nacre are a result of the warm waters it grows in. And a thick nacre means a large pearl. Harry says they must flip them regularly so the nacre grows evenly.
Jadi itu tidak boleh terlewatkan dia. Selama 40 hari itu ada schedule-nya, kita bikin schedule untuk 3 hari. 1 minggu setelah suntik, kita biarkan setelah lubang yang kita robek itu nutup, baru kita bolak-balik.
After 40 days, workers remove the oysters from the sea and clean them weekly. Harry checks the implanted oysters monthly to see how the pearl is developing. This is done for up to 2 years, before the first pearl can be harvested.
Untuk 3 tahun pertama itu minimal size-nya dari 0,9 atau 0,8 gram atau bisa dikatakan 7 sampai 11 mm. Itu tahap yang pertama, 3 tahun pertama. Itu bijinya itu 1,3 gram lah, minimal 0,8 lah ya.
Harry implants the same oyster 2 more times. Each time, the pearl Afdol harvests is bigger. By the 3rd harvest, the pearl can reach over 20 millimeters in diameter and over 8 grams in weight. But as much as pearl farmers like Mahmoud invest in the intense care needed to raise the oysters, the outcome is never guaranteed. Mahmoud says only 20% of the oysters that survive make the most valuable kind of pearl, almost perfectly round, lustrous and large. Mahmoud grades the pearls based on size, luster, shape and colour. The larger, rounder, shinier, minimally blemished pearls get the highest grade. That can be AAA or quadruple A, depending on the producer. Mahmoud then sells them to jewellers, like Rihanna Melia, who fashions the pearls into necklaces, earrings and rings. Rihanna seeks out the highest grade she can find, but it isn't easy.
Sangat sulit ditemukan untuk yang bagus. Saya juga kadang-kadang dalam 1 hari itu, ini dalam sekarang ini, saya minim stok material.
Lower grades are more available, but they're rougher, asymmetrical, and lack shine, and in the jewellery world, those are the least desirable. But even the highest grade pearls are not perfectly round. That's because even though they're farmed, they're still natural pearls, so finding a near perfect pearl, let alone enough to make a string necklace, is extremely rare. It took 9 years for Rihanna to find enough AAA grade pearls to make this necklace. She is finally able to sell it this year for $36,000 to a local buyer. That makes sourcing these expensive pearls worth it for Rihanna, who relies on farmers to continue to produce high quality pearls. But Mahmoud says pearl farmers need more support from the government, specifically around making nuclei readily available.
Kalau untuk itu sih memang iya, kami bisa tidak bisa pungkiri ya, bahwa untuk perizinan import ini yang agak sulit.
This company hauls in 60,000 pounds of crawfish a day. Once they're out of the water, the clock starts ticking. Farmers have just a few hours to get them weighed, sold, and into coolers, and these little guys have to stay alive the whole time.
As soon as they're dead, it starts breaking them down extremely fast. Yeah, it'll get mushy and spoil.
These crustaceans are big business for Louisiana. They contribute $300 million to the state's economy and end up across the U.S.
Do you ever sneak a bite?
But you can't help yourself, especially when they're hot.
But this industry didn't even take off until recent decades. In the 80s, some rice farmers took a massive gamble. They experimented with cultivating the crawfish that lived below their fields. And it paid off. In just 9 years, Madison McIntyre has built one of the biggest crawfish companies in the state, handling up to 4 million pounds a year.
Never imagined that it would be to this level, nor was it our goal. It kind of just happened organically.
But because the farmed crawfish industry is so young, it's like the Wild West, unregulated and fast-moving. So how exactly did Louisiana's rice farmers come to harvest crawfish? And why do they stay in such a tough business? Crawfish are freshwater crustaceans, related to lobsters and shrimp. And they're native to Louisiana's bayous, rivers, swamps, and rice fields, like this one.
And if you look closely, you'll see some holes. There's one right here.
They go by all sorts of names: crawdads, crayfish, mud bugs.
They come out the mud, literally.
From late September to October, rice farmers flood their fields, and the crawfish emerge from their burrows hungry. By November, he can start catching them in rows of traps. Mauricio Guillen, nicknamed Junior, heads out on the crawfish boat, which doesn't have a steering wheel.
And all that's controlled by foot pedals that are at his feet.
Armed with thick gloves, he empties each trap. He has just 7 seconds to dump out a trap, load in more bait, and drop it back in the water.
And that's just how much ground it covers between each trap.
He's got to move quickly so the crawfish don't die in the Louisiana heat.
Junior's pretty fast. He's a lot faster than me.
This table helps them weed out any unwanted critters. And it separates the crawfish by size.
The smaller peelers can fall through here. You know, they'll go from underneath here and then into these sags.
But crawfish's big break didn't even come until the 1980s. Rice farmers' profits were dipping. So looking for another income stream, they took a big risk and cultivated crawfish alongside the grain. Fourth-generation rice farmer Jim Johnson was one of them.
It just works almost perfect together. There's almost no better combination of vegetation to go for crawfish.
The rice plant provides a wetland for crawfish breeding and shade from the sun, and plays host to microorganisms like algae, larvae, and worms.
The crawfish will feed off of those.
The crawfish's poop then fertilizes the fields, and the two crop seasons line up perfectly. When farmers harvest the rice, the crawfish have safely burrowed themselves deep into the mud. Once the rice is picked, crawfish emerge from their burrows with babies. By winter, they're ready to be harvested and eaten. Soon, buyers all over the South, from Texas to South Carolina, began gobbling up the mud bugs. What was once just a local eat now makes up more than half of Jim's business.
And with declining margins in the rice industry through the years, the crawfish not only supplemented it, but helped agriculture thrive.
Today, the crops are an important part of economies like Welsh Louisiana's.
All the crawfish in the whole nation are farmed in a 35-mile square radius of this area.
From November to July, rice farmers end up with tons of crawfish, packed into sacks like these. Junior and his team will load them onto trucks and book it to the crawfish dock. In the summer months, they have to get the mud bugs weighed and in the cooler within 3 hours, or else the heat could kill them. And dead crawfish breed bacteria. Once cooked, it's technically still edible, but the meat falls apart and it doesn't taste as good. Madison pays rice farmers about $1.25 a pound for their catch. Unlike most crawfish mongers, he doesn't come from a farming family. In 2014, he and his friend Charlie started selling them out of his truck in New Orleans.
At an abandoned gas station, and we would serve boiled crawfish through there on the weekends.
It was so successful, he bought more trucks and expanded into a full-fledged enterprise, Parrish Seafood Wholesale. While a lot of crawfish companies focus on just one part of the process, Madison does it all, along with his dog June. He grows his own crawfish and buys from 36 other rice farmers. He also owns a company that hauls the catch, a processing plant, and restaurants, cutting out the middlemen.
Now we have a little over 60 employees. We run 14 trucks, 7 days a week, 24/7.
Madison washes some of his catch on this $150,000 machine.
How many times have you gotten poked by crawfish?
Every day, yeah, but you get used to it, like it doesn't really hurt.
Not only do they have to watch their fingers, they have to watch out for runaways.
I mean, they're escape artists, so yeah.
Crawfish have to hit the coolers right after washing to keep them alive until they're sold. Madison tries to move the high-grade, larger crawfish within 12 to 24 hours, but that's not always easy.
It's all pretty much done on a handshake. There's no contracts. You have to be careful because people can buy all of your crawfish in the beginning of the season, and then as soon as the catch picks up, they can leave you and buy from somebody else.
Stranding crawfish in these fridges.
It can be a lot of pressure.
The low-grade, smaller crawfish are easier for him to move because Madison just sells it to himself. Then he sends it to his Brobridge factory to process the tail meat. Workers start unloading the crawfish off the trucks starting at 4 a.m. They dump them into tanks and skim off any dead or weak ones from the top. Then they give the mudbugs a wash. A conveyor belt drops them into a giant steamer basket. Using a system of tracks, a worker carefully lowers the basket into a vat of boiling water. Just like lobsters, crawfish go in alive to get the best flavor. That's why it's so important to keep them kicking until this moment. It takes just 2 minutes to cook them through. Then Madison and the team break them down this steel table into the peeling room. Leona Williams has been peeling here for 50 years.
Learned this from mama at the age of 13. Get off of school, help our mom. Sometimes until 1 in the morning. So you break the head off, and then you pinch the tail. This is your meat. Peel them well to make sure that the veins are out for sure.
She can peel about 40 pounds worth a day.
And you gotta be kind of fast at it. That's about the only way you could make money.
They get paid $2.50 a pound.
Are you the fastest one here?
No, I'm not gonna say this. I have my sister right here. She's a little faster than I am.
The team in the next room vacuum seals the tails into 1-pound bags. Because competition is so stiff, Madison wouldn't tell us where he sells these, but he said they end up across the U.S. He also sends tail meat and whole crawfish to 3 restaurants he owns in the state, cooking up all kinds of Louisiana delicacies. Crawfish have been an important part of southern Louisiana's culture for centuries. According to the Native Heritage Project, the Houma indigenous people named themselves after the word for crawfish and used it as a war symbol. In the 1800s, a wave of French Canadians settled in Louisiana after being forced out of Canada by the British. They came to be known as the Cajuns, and they brought their lobster recipes with them. But short on lobster here, they swapped in crawfish. By the 1960s, crawfish had their own festival, and Creole restaurants were adding them to menus in New Orleans.
It was definitely a Louisiana delicacy. It didn't really get much farther than the state.
Crawfish have since gone definitively national, but locals still cook them into staples like etouffee, boudin, and boils. Madison's business partner, Charlie Johnson, uses a Cajun cooking style in his crawfish boils.
Make sure the drain's shut. This is liquid boil. So I'm adding that to the water.
He first boils the corn and potatoes, drains them, and then cooks the crawfish last.
Right there, when the tail starts to kind of separate from the head, there's that little white line. You can see the meat. That's usually a telltale sign that they're ready.
While New Orleans Creole chefs add dry seasoning to the water crawfish boil in, out here, Cajuns dump on the dry seasoning after they're cooked.
We shut that ice chest and we let them steam. I think the magic happens in the ice chest. That's when they start to soak up those seasonings.
Down here, folks stop by the restaurant well into the evening. The Cajuns also love their dip. While back in NOLA, they don't use any sauce.
Yeah.
With his factory, weigh station, and restaurants, Madison has become a considerable player in the crawfish industry.
We're building a new facility that's going to be focused on air freight crawfish.
But his success hasn't come without its challenges. As the industry boomed over the last 20 years, lots of people tried to get in on the action. By 2019, the number of crawfish farms in the state had doubled. And then came inflation. Madison says costs soared 40%. Last year, fuel alone cost him $150,000 more than normal.
That's a lot of money that would have been profit. Yeah, labor's pretty high, and we have mostly foreign labor.
95% of his staff is working in the U.S. on a visa.
And then we also have to house them and pay for transportation. You can't find local or American labor that would work as hard as these guys do side by side with us.
Madison says he pays them just under $14 an hour, almost double the minimum wage.
We'll put in 15 and 18-hour days, 7 days a week. So it's very demanding. We don't get to see our family as much during the season, but they don't get to see their family at all.
Soaring operation costs and low margins have forced dozens of Louisiana crawfish companies to close.
And so the people that came in just for the get-quick-rich scheme are not making it right now because of how tough the market is.
Madison says the size of his company has helped keep him afloat.
You know, we could absorb those blows, but a lot of people unfortunately couldn't.
What big changes have you made to make it through this kind of oversight?
We don't get big salaries.
Madison said Parrish Seafood Wholesale saw $500,000 in profit last year, and he paid himself just a $20,000 salary. He also says he invested more than 80% of the profit back into the company.
So if anything ever breaks or if coolers go out, we have backup everything. You know, backup trucks, backup ice machines, backup freezers, backup coolers. We have multiple forklifts, which are all just luxuries.
Because in an industry where one bad season could send a company packing, Madison has to fight to keep each crawfish alive.
I think, you know, in the next 5 or 6 years, it'll be very lucrative again to be in this industry because there'll only be a handful of people doing it.